And of course, we couldn't have done any of that without screwing it up at the beginning. But now we halfway know what we're doing, or not.
Howdy, Steve.
Hey, Joe. I'm putting this over here, so we have all of our little tools. Our little tools. Our
I
shit.
can't see. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Reduce.
We got peeps here already. That's very nice. Yeah, speakers, let's go. The ironic thing is there were no real speakers used in that presentation there, was there? That was all GPD
Yeah, really.
IR.
No speakers were harmed in the making of this track.
Yeah, we really fucked it up though, didn't we?
After all that, well, I mean, it's a lot of little details to remember. Okay, what software issue gets in the way of what hardware
Yeah.
issue under these
And
settings?
by the way, new computer running the whole show tonight.
Actually, no.
By the way, no new computer
We've gone
running the whole
back.
show.
The new
tonight.
computer hasn't shown up yet, so I went back to the laptop that we were using over the past year, but I hooked everything up differently so that the USB connectors work more efficiently, and that seemed to help a lot.
Chris was the one who typed speakers, let's go. And then when we announced the IRS, he said, no speakers, let's go.
Yeah, pretty much.
Thank you for the enthusiasm, no matter what.
Would not be a malcontent stream if insert random issue. Yeah, Luz jumps right on that.
You know what?
All right, so you guys are going to spell check each other for the rest of the show. All right, fine.
We don't make nearly as many mistakes as we used to, and it's kind of a drag. Because that was one of the best parts of the show, I think. We would go on and there'd be no sound.
We got all like knowledgeable and professional and stuff.
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay, all right. Well, you're right. You're right about that.
What sorts of things used to happen? I know the sound thing was always bad. We'd go on and like talk for a minute and a half and nobody would hear anything that we were saying. I remember that quite often.
Right. Stalling, the server stalling.
Yeah.
The images freezing.
Yeah, exactly, Chris. The show got better. Damn.
I think it got better after we built the whole back line, or were we still?
I don't remember. The first season you did it there and I did it up in Altadena. That was the entire first season.
Yeah, and you were always having bandwidth problems.
Totally. Oh, I remember the very first Malcontents.
You did.
I
In
did it in my old apartment
Yeah,
with the horrible internet,
yeah,
and I had to bail, and I just
yeah,
left you there
yeah.
all by yourself.
Your apartment with the 56K modem in it. Yeah, that was rich.
I think it was worse than that. I was like, uh-oh, I just moved in here, and I might need to move on day 3. But anyway, yeah, crystal clear, no potato vision. That's kind of cool, huh? Last time was pretty bad, and I think there was a lag. There was the audio lag as well, right?
There was a couple of things going on. So, you know, big brain, big brain here thinks, instead of having the computer communicate to the internet directly through
Oh yeah,
Wi-Fi,
this guy.
wouldn't it be wouldn't it be a faster, more reliable connection if I use the Ethernet connection to my wireless router rather than going through wireless?
Yeah,
And
sounded good to me.
that was what was going on the previous show. And then I brought the laptop that we've been using, which barely has enough. We've got 3 monitors in here, barely has enough juice to run all 3 monitors without freezing. But apparently it has a wicked wireless card in it, because with the Ethernet cable connected, the upload speed is 50 meg.
Wasn't
And
even
with
close.
when I turn that off and switch back to the wireless, it's 390. So uh, the upload speed stays at about 10 to 12 meg with the wireless, and about 7 to 9 with the Ethernet cable. So
Well,
there's definitely shit going on.
what's really great, thanks for the feedback, guys. That's really helpful. Chris is saying, and a couple other people have said that the guitar sounded great in the stream, so we can go back to doing more guitar
Yeah,
in the weeks
well,
going forward, which has been like a
the-
big thing that we've wanted to get together.
what's really funny about that is I took out all the stuff in the signal path that all of my people that advised me, oh, you should do this and this is going to sound great and blah blah blah. I took all of that shit out.
So you unplugged the potato. You
I
went, you
took
made
the
soup with
I
it
took
instead.
the I took the mic pre out and ran directly into the interface, which also is a mic pre. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
it's a
it's
a
not a
UFA.
sexy mic pre, but it
It's
does the job, right?
well, it's got better bandwidth and lower noise and more headroom and everything than any of those other things. And so I just unhooked it all and went straight in and stopped trying to be all fancy about it. And just like, oh, everything's there.
Yeah.
So we were shooting ourselves in the foot for quite a while.
Hey, I just want to mention up front, guys, any questions that you pop in there? I've just noticed we've been kind of drifting towards this format where we're going to talk about, well, we're going to bullshit for a while, and then we're going to talk about the main meat of what we wanted to address, and then we will go through all of the questions and get into those at the end of the show. So if you're asking things and we're not jumping in on them right away, know that we're not going to ignore you. We're going to get to them.
Did you bullshit today?
Wait, what? How does he answer that? How does he answer it?
No.
No.
Did you try to bullshit today? Yes.
What else was I going to say? Oh, but this is a question that I think you should answer right away. Chris wants to know, what the hell is this
This
guitar,
is the thing that's making everything sound so good.
and what is the pickup?
This is a Nelson.
Bruce Nelson, who's
This is
been on the show.
It's a Bruce Nelson custom, and I'm not going to say that he made me a custom guitar to my specifications, because if he had done that, it would have been a horrible disaster. But I did make a few requests and he accomplished those. The main thing was the top and the color, and the rest of it, I just said, I don't want to know. I want to know. Don't tell me anything. Um, and it's a Lindy. I think it's a Lindy Fralin. See, that's
Oh, okay.
how little I know or care. I plugged it in. I played it.
Interesting.
I went.
Sure, it's not a Lawler.
Is it a Lawler?
I think
Fralin,
it
Lawler?
might be a Lawler, but I don't know. We'll
You
have
know,
to ask. John's cracking me up again.
I just
He says, it sounds great through my
It-
iPhone
it-
speakers,
it's
which are
it's
the best.
something I can tell you definitively about the pickup. It's got a chrome cover on it and little screws, and it bolts to the top of the guitar, right to the very top. It just screws right onto it.
See,
And
Mark?
and
You see what Mark just said? That has to be, you got to tell Bruce,
okay, well,
call it, that's what the finish should be called.
the neglected swimming pool. Well, actually,
Neglected swimming
okay.
pool green.
So when he
That's
first
awesome.
brought it over, some of you guys have heard this already a million times. But when he first brought it over, about a week before it arrived, I had read this story online about a girl who went missing from her after her high school prom in like the 73 or something. She never made it home from the prom.
Hmm.
And 5 years ago, a stream lake kind of area, a lake that's fed by a little stream, a little freshwater pond kind of thing, the water level went down and exposed the top of this car. And a guy driving down this highway saw the top of the car protruding just above the water line a little bit. So he called the cops, and it turned out to be you could see the license plate. So he took a picture of the license plate, and it was her car.
Hmm.
And then they pulled the car out, and she was in it, and she had just run off the road in 1973. And when I saw this color, the look of the, I said to Bruce, you could also almost see that poor girl sitting in, and everybody in the room just went, "Oh man, you really went to the dark."
Bro!
But that was my first impression. What can I say? So hopefully her spirit lives on in that guitar, because it's amazing.
Chris,
So yeah, you can like all go home now and do and like try to wash out your eyes and ears and just erase the whole awful memory that I just
gee, thanks, Steve.
yeah.
Bless you.
And yeah, Bruce is like kind of,
He's like, oh.
he's doing this when I'm telling him the story. Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I guess that's a compliment.
Well, I like neglected swimming pool green. That's what I vote for.
It definitely, when you have the guitar in your hands and you look at the top, it definitely has that,
Oh, it shimmers, man.
like
It
that
dances.
vibe of, you can definitely dive into that neglected pool.
And another really interesting thing about this guitar is it's very light, and you kind of think, ooh, it's going to be neck heavy, but it's not. It's like perfectly balanced.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. It's
Bruce
like
is
it's
a
like
whiz.
Silvertone light. It's a
Yeah.
pine body,
Uh,
maple top, and a maple neck, a roasted maple neck, and a roasted rosewood fretboard too, as I recall. It's not ebony; it's roasted rosewood and roasted. What do I know? That's the thing now, isn't it? Roasted. So I actually,
roast potatoes.
it's supposed to make the to stabilize the wood and make it more toneful and all that, like aging it, and great. It does sound great, and I have a bass that he did for me that has a roasted maple neck, and it plays just like you. Did you play that bass? It's just fantastic to play, easy. It stays in tune, tunes really nicely,
Oh, that used to be my bass.
yeah,
When
yeah,
you had Uptown by
yeah,
Bruce.
totally Uptown. But I gotta say, I don't really love the color of roasted maple. Some people are into it because it looks aged, but to
I
me, it
like it.
looks a little too aged.
Why aren't you particular?
Ah,
Yeah.
that's why I don't say anything, because if I said something like that, well, I can find one that isn't as aged, and of course, it won't sound as good.
What do you mean you won't say anything? You talk about how the color looked like the worst moment of somebody's life.
Yeah, but that was appropriate because the top of my head. That wasn't anything that was a compliment. I Nobody's gonna understand that.
Oh man. Um See any good movies this week, Steve?
I saw a few. You know what? I like seeing movies that I've seen before, so I kind of been moving out. I saw um, Kevin Spacey movie, Pax, CPAX,
Don't know it.
where he's uh, a mental patient. He's a mental patient wandering around the streets, and he gets scooped up with a couple other people off the street and put in jail, and ends up going to a mental institution. And he thinks that he's a being from another planet called CPAC,
K-Pax?
KPAC. Yeah, so I saw that. I love that. I love that movie. I love the scene where they're in the Griffith Auditorium, the the laser light show room that
Like
they
a
have
planetarium kind of thing. Like,
yeah, the planetarium. They're in the planetarium, and he sketches out this formula that describes where his planet that he came from is, and these geophysicists are like plugging the numbers into a program that models where it is and exactly lines up with this rough sketch he did by hand from memory. So it was the whole thing was really. So there was that. I watched another Kevin Spacey movie, The Usual Suspects,
oh yeah, of course.
which is, I'm watching and I'm just totally getting into it. And Eric goes like, and like in the last 10 minutes, she goes, I don't get it. And I said, okay, it's 10 more minutes. Just wait.
Kaiser Sose.
And then Kaiser Sose, he like, where his foot straightens out, he's no longer walking with a limp and all that. And then it's like, it all comes together.
Verbal Kent? Verbal was his.
Yeah.
Was his
Verbal was his name. Yeah, his
who
first
was
name.
pretending to be.
Yeah.
When I lived in Pasadena, and this is before Kevin got popped for being, a total shyster. But I had this neighbor in my building, and her name was Ellie, and she was about 75 years old, and just had her nose in everybody's business. And one day I saw her out in front of her unit. Hi, Ellie. How are you doing? Like, I was just at the Vons in South Pasadena, and I saw Kevin Spacey there. And you know what? He's a dirty little man. I was like, why'd you say, what made you say that? She said, he didn't bother to shave.
Oh my God.
And I'm going, and at the time, I hadn't either. I'm speaking right to her.
It reminds me of my grandmother on my father's side. The first time I grew a mustache, so I'm like 19 or something, and
you just had a stash.
We went to visit grandma, and I had a little bad excuse for a mustache, and she goes, "What's that on your face? It looks dirty." I'm like,
"You are a dirty little man."
Dirty little man.
Yeah. Well, speakers.
Yeah.
You ever heard of one?
Well, there's been a lot of stuff going on with speakers. And actually, well, there's a whole lot of stuff going on about speakers and reactive loads on the interwebs, on the internet machine. And it seems like everybody's running out of things to talk about because they're all talking about the same thing. And so now there's probably about a dozen or a half a dozen speaker comparison videos, reactive load and attenuator reamper comparison videos. Some of them are better than others, but they're all kind of grinding over this same territory. And so that's interesting how much time is being invested into the subject of comparing IRs to real speakers under whatever these supposedly scientifically controlled conditions, but that they're not necessarily. And the thing that keep popping up in my mind was, since when did the Vintage 30 become the de facto standard for all things speaker? Because it certainly gets treated that way. And I guess the reason I asked that question is because, we were around when the Vintage 30 first came out.
Oh yeah, it was a stinker. That was like the consensus.
It
Like,
was
oh no, not
it
those.
was roundly panned by
Yeah.
just about
Hey, did you open your
everybody.
cab and see what you got? Yeah, I got those, you know.
Things.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I just bought, or I bought some of those to put in my cab, and they lasted like 3 minutes. And everybody was complaining about, wait a minute, it's actually a 60 or 70 watt speaker, isn't it? Why do they call it a 30? It's advertising, it's marketing. Well, it certainly doesn't look vintage. It's a vintage 30. So is it like because there was the 30-watt greenback, basically the speaker that was
Yeah,
in the bass cab,
yeah.
if you want to call it a bass cab. But uh, so there was some confusion there. Well, why doesn't it have the plastic back on it? Or, how it doesn't sound anything like that greenback 30, the 30H. So, but it's not a 25, and it doesn't sound like a 25, and it doesn't sound like a 30H, and it honestly doesn't sound very vintage. It's tubby on the bottom and kind of shrill on the top, and blah 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 blah. And um, then the curious phenomena happens where somebody takes an amp
Thanks, Wayne.
that has a particular that has a particular somebody has an amp that has a particular cab with it, and they put those speakers in it, and then they go and they make a record, and the record blows up, and then all of a sudden it's all about that speaker.
That's how all this shit works,
It's how it
actually.
all works. But
Yeah.
it's annoying sometimes when so much stock is placed on speakers. And so when I'm seeing all these videos and all these comparisons, it's, your comparison is all filtered through this one particular lens.
Mm.
And not only is there a lot more to the story than that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a lot less interesting than you would think, even though there's a lot more to it. If you went through all of it, if you actually did put different speakers into cabs, the amount of work that you would have to go through to get something that anybody would be able to follow from beginning to end, it's impossible. So
Well,
it's entertainment value. I suppose it's you sort of learn a little bit something about maybe some of the qualitative differences between the different reactive loads. But then even then, the people that are reviewing them and comparing them don't necessarily know why they're behaving the way they behave either, or how to equalize the experiment so that there's so that they're comparing apples to apples,
Yeah,
right?
it's tricky designing really good guitar experiments, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, and
So
and
I'm
I'm not saying
wondering.
that these. I'm saying they're intentionally, bad or negligent. It's just that
No,
there's
no, not at all.
way too much going on there for that little segment to be that definitive. For example,
Well, wait, sorry.
okay,
Just put a bookmark in this.
the-
Before you, I'm worried you're going to dive in super deep here. So before we do that, would it be helpful to talk about how speakers work and define some basic stuff, just in case you run into that terminology as you're riffing on this stuff?
yeah, probably.
Is that too big an ask?
I don't think so, and it's actually a little bit uninteresting, but it's probably a good idea to lay down a kind of a baseline so that you don't assign too much importance to a thing that's not that important.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know a lot about speakers, and sometimes when we do know a lot about something, we assume a lot in the
Right,
person that we're speaking to,
right.
you know? So maybe if we do like a cursory uh, primer on how speakers work and the basic parts of their construction, that
Sure.
might be
Yeah, sure.
uh, instructive.
Right. Well, a speaker is basically a motor.
Okay.
It's got a coil of wire attached to a cone that's suspended in a frame.
I have a, let's pop this up here. No, not that.
Not that. Well,
That's helpful.
that's a cone, and you see the dust cap on the cone, and you see the ribs on the cone, and you see the little shiny edge around the edge of the cone, and all those things are important. They're there for a reason. Um, but at the end of the day, there isn't a dramatic difference between a range of speakers that are all kind of in the same power band, the 50 watt, 60, 70 watt speakers. They all kind of operate around the same range that are the most popular speakers. And then there's the outliers, the one that are
Let's look at this.
that have a higher sensitivity, that have bigger magnets, that can handle more power. There's all that. But if you look at the illustration on the right, you have a dust cap, which goes in the over the cone, and that's just to keep the dust out of the voice coil. And you've got the frame, and to the right of the frame is a thing called the spider. In this drawing, that's in the wrong order. I don't know who made this drawing, but the spider should be in between the cone and the basket, which is the blue thing. And the spider is the voice coil side of the suspension of the cone. So the cone is suspended around the perimeter of the frame, where the cone is affixed to the frame with adhesive. So the front outer edge of the cone is supported onto the frame, glued to the frame. And then the secondary suspension point of the speaker is on the other end where the voice coil is, and the spider is doing that. And the job of the spider is to make sure that the voice coil slides evenly in and out of the voice coil gap without rubbing on the sides.
Oh, okay.
So
So it's
it's
almost a guide.
yeah, it's difficult to see, and they exaggerate it here. But if you look at the left side, right in the middle, it says voice coil and front plate,
Yes.
and magnet and back plate pole. So the voice coil is moving back and forth over that pole. So it's basically going in and out of the magnetic field. So it's sliding back and forth. And they're really exaggerating the diameter of the front plate versus the diameter of the pole. In reality, it's a very small gap of maybe, I don't know, 20 thousandths of an inch
Oh,
roughly.
wow. Okay.
So that's why it has to be so carefully suspended and anchored at the voice coil sides, because it's just a piece of paper, and when you really start laying into it, that paper moves around and distorts, not like audio distortion, but physical distortion. It
Mhm.
bends, twists, and so they can only take so much abuse there. But that's basically what's going on. And you see the voice coil and the motor plate there on the right of the right part of the illustration. And so they're pretty simple devices, and for the most part, guitar speakers all behave very similarly.
Jettison
We
this.
can probably jettison that for now.
And by the way, guys, if you want to look at this during the show, um, I put a link to the image in the actual show notes in the description of this video.
So basically, you throw a voltage at a voice coil, it sends, it causes the voice coil to generate a magnetic field.
Mhm.
And that magnetic field pushes and pulls against the magnetic field created by the magnet.
Okay.
So the signal going into the voice coil is changing phase as audio signal does. It's made up of complex combination of sine waves, low frequency sine waves, mid-range frequency sine waves, high frequency sine waves. So the coil is reacting to those different frequencies and moving the coil assembly back and forth at whatever frequency or combination of frequencies are being received by the voice coil.
Mm-hmm.
So the cone is moving both slowly and quickly. It's moving different ways at different frequencies.
That makes sense.
So that's how you hear a range of frequencies all at one time.
Yeah.
It's also why a speaker has a kind of a ratty audio curve, a frequency response curve.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's happening is as the audio frequency changes, it affects the impedance of the speaker. And it creates these resonant points. So wherever there's a resonance on the speaker, and there are a lot of them, not just one big one, but there are a lot of little ones too. So when there's a resonant point on the cone itself, at that frequency, the cone will vibrate more.
Mm.
Whereas, for example, if you put a 1 kilohertz tone into a speaker, it'll vibrate a certain amount. If you change that frequency to 1.1 kilohertz, you will move it either towards or away from a resonant point. If that increasing that frequency moves you away from a resonant point, the volume of that frequency will dip a little bit.
Mm.
And if it goes towards the resonant point, the volume at that frequency will increase a little bit. And so that's what turns into the frequency graph of the speaker. And that's how it's interpreted as frequency response, how the speaker sounds. Now there's another characteristic associated with speakers, which is called the impedance curve. And what that is kind of like the bulk resonance of the whole system being measured at a low frequency. And that's why when you see an impedance curve for any given speaker, you see this big rise at right around 100 hertz. It's huge. Right. And then it drops back down to a normal level throughout the rest of the speaker's frequency range until you start getting to around 1 or 2 kilohertz, and then it starts gradually rising. Mm-hmm. And when that rise starts happening, that's a gradual decrease in impedance and corresponding increase in resonance. So that's a gradual thing, and that's how a speaker tends to get brighter as you play up the neck on a guitar. So the impedance curve doesn't show you those little tiny impedance fluctuations on the audio graph because they're very small by comparison. You just see this curve and you see this big giant hump because it's being measured at a particular scale. It's like zooming in on a microscope. From far away, you see this big hump and you see this curve.
Yeah.
If you zoom way, way, way in under a microscope and look at that impedance curve with a lot more resolution, then you would see some of the little...
It's like looking at the stock market over, a century's time.
versus a
It's
month.
always like this, but
Right.
when you zoom in, it's like whoa.
Yeah, right. There's a
And
crash
eventually
here
it
and there's a
climbs, but
boom
yeah,
there,
yeah.
and yeah, it's the same kind of concept. So um, those are the things that determine how a speaker behaves, and it's not, and the speaker doesn't behave exactly that way with every amplifier.
Makes sense.
It doesn't behave exactly that way with every cabinet that it's installed in. It doesn't behave exactly that way with two identically dimensioned cabinets that are made a little bit differently or with different wood.
Mhm.
They don't sound exactly the same if the spacing between the speakers in a 412 is a little greater or lesser than the spacing between the speakers in another 412. So there's
Right.
a million things.
Or the front-loaded cabinets and the baffling thickness
Those are
and the
like big differences relative
yeah.
to all the little subtle things. Did did you see this story? I've over the last couple of weeks, there's a story about this Stradivarius.
Oh, I haven't seen this, but I love Stradivarius
There's
stories.
a Stradivarius known as the Mendelssohn
Who's
Stradivarius.
been playing it?
It's I'll get to that.
Okay.
It was owned by the Mendelssohn family in Germany in the 20s, and it was um, it was in a safe deposit box in the Mendelssohn Bank.
Okay.
And during World War II, um, the government in place at the time basically gave the Mendelssohn Bank to Deutsche Bank. So all the contents of the bank changed hands. And the violin eventually was sold a few times and disappeared. But there's photographs of it. And about 10 years ago, it turned up in Japan.
Hmm.
And it was
What kind of
called,
shape was it in?
it's in fantastic shape. And
Really?
it's been being played by a concert um, violinist named Nomura, I think his name is. He went to great effort to acquire this violin that was known as the Stella from supposedly a couple of years before the production date of the Mendelssohn violin, which was made in 1709, and supposedly the Stella was made in 1707.
Hmm.
Why am I going through all this? Well, because a really knowledgeable and serious sleuth that's been working on this project for decades saw a photograph of the Stella and knew immediately it was the Mendelssohn
Oh.
just from photographs. Why?
Hmm.
How did she do that? You know what's funny about it is any of you people could do the
Because it
same
said
thing.
Mendelssohn on the headstock. Come on.
The grain of the wood on the top.
Yeah.
He looked identical.
Hmm.
Now, you can't, any of you know anything about wood and how it behaves when you slice it into little thin sheets and carve it into a shape and put finish on it. A grain is like a fingerprint.
Mm-hmm.
There's no two alike. So when you can take a picture of a violin that was, the picture was taken in black and white in 1922 and superimpose it on a photograph from 1990 from this Stella violin that was on display someplace, and it's a very clear picture that you can, that is so clear and so well photographed that you can superimpose the two violins on top of each other, and the grain all lines up. That will never, ever, ever happen in any handmade production, anything like that.
Right.
It will never happen twice. It'll always be a different grain. It'll be the grain structure will show up differently on the top in different positions. The grain will be different just by taking a slice of wood off of a tree and then taking another slice of that same piece of wood, but a quarter of an inch down from
Right.
where it'll be an entirely different looking thing. It
Yeah.
won't look like the same thing, only deeper. It will change because the grains are dynamic things. They're shifting and moving through the entire chunk of wood, right?
Right.
So there's no way that you can look at those two. And I'm telling you, go watch this story and look at photographs of it. And what I found myself to be doing is like, I'm looking, I put those two violins side by side and I looked at them back and forth and I went, yeah, she's really brilliant. She like figured that out. And then I stopped myself and I went, wait a minute. There's a scratch here. There's a ding there. The grain goes like this exactly. Of course, it's the same instrument.
Yeah.
There is no way that it is not the same instrument. So, if I took this guitar and somehow managed to make not change anything sonically or physically about the neck, nothing sonically or physically about the pickup, and the bridge and the pots and anything else and put a different body on it, it will be an entirely different instrument. It won't be the same sounding instrument. It'll be an entirely new thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know this. You guys know this. Any instrument you pick up, you can't go in the Guitar Center or any music store, no matter how esoteric or how much money you spend, you cannot go buy 3 59 Les Pauls that all sound identical, that all have the identical grain. It won't ever happen. It'll never happen with speakers either. The cones are just a pulp of paper that are stamped into a shape and then glued together with glue, and there'll be tolerances and there'll be areas in the composition of the cone where the density will be heavier or lighter, or so what the frequency graphs and what the impedance curves tell us is that this speaker will approximately do this approximately 80% of the time, but 10 identical ones will have a whole range.
So I have a question for you about that.
Well, ask your question for just 1 second.
Yeah.
Now, the whole concept of Bose speakers, when Bose came out, they had this whole new concept that we put a whole bunch of little speakers in a box, and you bounce the sound off the walls, and it'd be a much more natural, linear sounding thing. And the way they got reviewed in the magazines and the way people sort of understood that was that these smaller speakers are spreading out the sound more evenly, and that's why they sound so linear. And that's not what was happening. What was happening is every speaker, if this is a frequency graph, every speaker has something like that, but slightly different.
Right.
So if you take 2 identical speakers, they're kind of going to be like this. And then if you take 2 more of them and put them in parallel, they're going to kind of be like this. And then when you do it like 8 times, all the peaks and dips on the speaker are going to flatten out, because each individual speaker is filling in peaks and crevices where the other speaker isn't.
Yeah.
Right? So graphs are an approximation, number one. And number two, the way those graphs are generated is designed to give you an approximation of its behavior without any distortion artifacts incorporated into it. And the way they do that is they power it with a solid state power amp, so that and I'm not going to get into this right now, but the characteristic of a solid state power amp, especially an industrial grade one, is going to have a very high damping factor. So it's basically going to keep the speaker from doing stuff that it wasn't designed to do. It's going to keep it under control during the test. Number one. Number two, they're only testing it at 1 watt because they don't want to tweak the mechanical characteristics
Yeah.
of the assembly.
Yeah.
They want to know what the general frequency response is and how it responds to not the change of impedance, because they're locking down the impedance by using the solid state power amplifier. So in order to create that impedance curve, they need to have a power amp that will not influence that curve,
Right.
so that they can portray it accurately. So when you plug that speaker into a tube amplifier, all that stuff on those graphs just goes right out the window. And what you see on a graph is not what you see on every speaker that comes out of that model. You see that particular speaker under that particular test at that particular time, under that particular amount of signal being input into it with the microphone that they're using to test it. And then because those are so variable, even those things are variables, they take that data and then they run through a it's a computer program. They run a computer program that basically eliminates stray variables like room reflections or the kind of material that the room is made of. It'll be in an anechoic chamber, but how big is the chamber? So how big is the room that the test is being done in? And any of the things that are mechanically connected to the speaker in order for it to be tested, it has to be bolted to something, right?
Right.
Can't be cement.
Right.
So it's usually wood, and it's usually probably a pretty stiff kind of wood, but it's still wood, and so it has to be equalized out. So it has to go through all this stuff in order to bring you that.
And I'm thinking about what cabling are they using? Too? You know
See,
what I mean?
okay.
Like that's such
Well,
a
but
big...
see, it doesn't have to be that, but it probably is 14 gauge. I mean, it doesn't have to really. They don't have to worry about it carrying a lot of current because they're only running 1 watt.
Yeah, yeah.
So if they were running 100 watts, that would be a 3 amps of current. 3 amps of current going through a 16 gauge speaker cable is nothing.
Yeah.
Those cables are good for easily 15.
Yeah.
So the average 16 gauge speaker cable can handle 5 times as much current as the average 120 watt amp can put out. So
but they all sound different.
But they all sound different, and they sound different because there's all kinds of environmental interactions that you experience when you're listening to it in your listening environment, and that's what makes them sound different. So, for example, if you went into a room to listen to 3 or 4 cabs, in order to effectively listen to those, the room would have to be huge.
Yeah.
Like practically an airport hangar huge.
Yeah.
And there would have to be no reflections in there.
Exactly.
And the reason you need it to be big, a big space, is so that you can space, say, 4 identically loaded cabinets, space them far away so that when you play through one, it doesn't influence the behavior of the other one. If you put speaker cabinets really close together and play through one and then play through the other one, the sound pressure level coming out of one will excite the speakers in the cabinet next to it.
That's wild.
So they have to be far away.
Effect.
And then you have to mic them exactly the same way. You have to basically, and this is what we would do when we were originally designing our cabs. We were in a big room, and we would set a distance where you'd have to stand three positions. 100% on axis, like 0.
Yeah.
And then 45 degrees each way.
Okay.
So we'd take a tape and mark the floor at that.
Awesome.
Like, I think it was probably 8 feet away from the cab with a line there. So we'd have the 0 axis and the 45 degree axis this way and the 45 degree axis this way. And each cab had several feet of distance between them.
So
and they had the same thing. We did
Walmart?
We actually did it we did it in a couple places. We rented SAR and did it in a big room there. And there was another rehearsal place that I
Okay.
used to use in the 90s called Audible Sound in Burbank. And they had a big room there. We did it in there. And then we had a relatively big room in our Burbank factory in the early 2000s that had an area that we were now familiar enough with the behavior of the speakers that we could check them out comparatively. Ooh. Oh
What?
man, somebody read my mind. I was getting thirsty.
Something wicked this way comes.
Ooh, thank
I
you.
have no idea what this
John.
is, but it looks outstanding.
Sorry.
This is a coffee martini.
Oh, I was hoping it was. It looked like
Cheers.
one. Cheers. Thank you, Nico-chan.
Now I just told somebody had asked, what I'm drinking these days, and I just told them
Agua.
water. We've been trying so hard to get rid of all these bottles of things we accumulated between COVID and now, and just finally getting it all down. And then somebody, oh man, I want to give you a bottle. So it's coffee now.
This is fantastic, Erico.
But that was just dead
sweet,
on.
isn't
No, it's not too sweet.
I mean, it's on the border, but it's delicious.
No, it's working for me. What's the little sparkles on the top?
Coffee.
Ground coffee. See, it's not. You can't just put like
Man,
espresso and mix it with vodka and do
No,
whatever.
it's
No,
there.
it's got to have the little coffee bean sprinkles in it too. It's just
I went
genius.
to a friend's birthday party last night, and I drank way more than I planned to. And I have not had a great day because of that. So this is a little bit of hair of the dog. And
So
it's
you
worth
had a question. That
oh,
do you
a
remember
little
what the question was?
tangential. Yeah, I remember what it was. When you're talking about when these speaker manufacturers are issuing their speaker graphs,
Mhm.
what do you think the procedure is for coming up with what they're going to present the public? Like, are they testing 10, 20 speakers, rating them all, and then averaging them out, and that's what you get? Because they're not just, this is our prototype, we tested that one, and that's what we're going to report on to the public, right? They're going to test a lot of them and then kind of average the mean,
I don't
and then
think
that's
so.
what you're going to see. Really?
No.
Huh.
No. Because
They just test the prototype and that's it?
because the cone, they're going to do multiple tests until they come up with the one that they say, okay, this is it. But first of all, think about where these speaker designs originated from in the first place. So, why do we
I
have
don't know.
why do we have Celestine greenbacks? Because when Marshall got going, they were looking for speaker suppliers, and they were looking for the best price. And that's a good price, and this is a reputable speaker manufacturer, so we'll use those. And then they buy those, and then they find out that they don't hold up, and so we need something with a little more power. Speaker manufacturer A says, yeah, we don't have anything any higher power than that. Why? Well, because we've basically spent most of our development, making speakers for radios, and so we don't really have anything over 25 or 30 watts.
Yeah.
We'd have to develop that, and some other company goes, oh, well, we have speakers in this range, and that really goes to it goes to what purpose the speakers were designed for originally. They weren't. Marshall didn't go to Celestia and say, we need a 12-inch speaker that's just going to knock Jimmy Page's feet off.
Because what
What is
that
that
at that point?
What is that?
We
Right.
didn't know what that was. Jimmy didn't know what that was.
So they made a speaker, they put it in an amp, both the speaker and the amp and the cabinet were all unknown quantities. People played through and went, oh, yeah, I like that. Okay, well, let's stick with that. Don't change the program. Well, then they realized that they have to change the program. Transformers are blowing, tubes are failing, speakers are popping. We have to do this, we have to do that, we need more, so they're it's
It's an
the,
iterative process with everybody involved.
yeah, it's no one person is saying it should be blah 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 blah.
But I think this is a really important point. Everybody knows this too, but I think it's kind of what we're saying is when we're talking about, trying to answer the question of, what makes for a really great guitar speaker, like a lot of it is, well, it's a great guitar speaker because when I play through it, it sounds like that record that changed my life. That's why it's a great guitar speaker.
Yeah, it's the same. It's like asking the question, what makes great vanilla ice cream?
Yeah.
Because you go to the store and there's 8 million vanillas. There's organic vanilla. There's vanilla bean. There's a vanilla bean with vanilla bean chips in it. There's how much vanilla did they put in? How much of the bean?
Smoked vanilla.
Right.
Yeah.
Where do the beans come from? Are they African beans? Are they, you know, Russian beans? Are they English beans? Are they Indian beans? Are they Mexican beans?
How long were they in the warehouse before they
Yeah.
were, processed? And I mean, this is very real.
And there's all this discussion going on about the roller cones, and the formula that oh, look at this here.
Guys,
We're just gonna be having fun at your expense now, people. Here's a napkin for you.
what did you just utter a minute ago?
I don't know what I even said.
Vanilla ice cream, yo.
Yeah. So we got Gelson's artisan ice cream, vanilla bean, rich vanilla with vanilla bean specks.
Okay. That's some rich marketing bullshit.
Okay?
This is the vanilla from Gelson's.
Yeah, with the little vanilla bean specks in it.
If you
right?
don't have a Gelson's near you, it's an overpriced grocery chain. What do you think? Yay?
It's vanilla.
Ooh, I kind of want to throw it in here.
Well,
You know what?
good. It's a little sweet, but
Bruce, hey man, we're talking about your guitar. Got a question for you. What is the pickup in Steve's guitar?
oh yeah.
We're like, was it a Fralin or was it a Lawler? I'm eating ice cream.
Well,
What do you think?
I think the good thing is that
Wait.
I'm not really a vanilla fanatic.
That was my question. Are you a connoisseur? A Lawler Imperial. Okay.
What's an imperial?
I thought it was, that's kind of their, what's the word? Flagship humbucker. It's a great, great, great pickup.
Really? And
PF,
So-
PA.
okay, so the same thing with the speakers and with the pickups. So, all right, so Lawler Imperial. So what is the Lawler Imperial? And okay, it's their flagship speaker base. Okay, so
Pickup.
what reference to what? Oh, a PAF. Of course, they're all reference to a PAF. In the 70s and 80s, all these new kind of pickups came out. And then when people sort of got sick of modern pickups, they, you know what? I really like the pickup that was in my 59. Oh, well, hey, I can make a reissue
So
of
you
that.
cheers, Bruce. It's their vanilla humbucker. My man. Very nice.
Well, and that's a real inside joke. Nobody's gonna understand, but
Oh, from Trug?
yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
Trug. We keep wanting to have you on the show, and
Je-
it never seems to work.
Jerry was the owner of Rock Block Music in Nashville back in the 90s, and he was a nutcase. So we used to tease him all the time. And he had a bit of a stutter. It was one of those good old boy Southern kind of, like Obama does that thing where he does, he does that kind of thing, that
Yeah.
little sort of affectation. He had that. And when you tried to ask him a straight question, it took him forever to get it out because it's kind of like, And
Oh.
he'd be like, Jerry,
Here's
just
the wind up.
how much? Just, well, my cost is really, and it's going up, you know. And so I gotta make my margin. Jerry, how much?
CT, we're trying. We're trying to get Trug on the show. Are we not?
We did. He promised he was coming out here, and then he.
Well, I remember one time we were going to have Trug and Paige on the show at the same time, and it fell through. I think Paige got a cold or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were going to have Trug on, I think even last month, and
then that changed.
Yeah, it changed. So
we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. It'll be very fun.
Okay,
evening.
so did you ask your question?
I did.
Could you
refresh? You kind of answered it. It was just talking about did you know what the process was for speaker manufacturers?
Yeah. Okay. So, after we get rid of the part where some of these speakers where the company's going, oh shit, I think we're on to something. We better keep doing that.
Yeah.
Because when we made this and everybody thought it was cool, but then we got asked to make a more powerful one and we made that, then people came back and said, what about the one that you made before? I like that. I don't care that if it doesn't handle the power.
In the late 60s, when all of this stuff was becoming like the thing that people wanted to do, if you read all of those old interviews, nobody was talking really about tone. They were talking about, these amps are great. They don't blow up as much. These amps are great. Yeah. They're loud enough to get up over the damn drummer.
And not only that, but you know, with regard to those speakers that were just kind of legacy designs, they weren't forward thinking. We're designing a speaker for this new paradigm. They weren't doing that. They were just like going, oh, what did we do? And how did we repeat it?
Yeah.
It was that kind of thing going on. Also, around that period of time between the 60s and 70s, Celestion wasn't the king of the block.
Right.
It was Fane. Fane was king shit in England and probably 2 or 3 times the size
of
Celestion.
Were Fanes in the early Sound Cities?
Yes. They were in the early Sound Cities. They were in the early Vox. They were in the early
bananas.
In the Salmer amps had Fanes, and there was a couple of other companies. There were 3 or 4 other companies that were making speakers.
What was the standard Fane 12-inch speaker of that time period?
Okay, well, here's the whole problem with Fane.
Uh-huh.
They were a huge OEM outfit. They made you whatever you told them to make. They didn't have
and you'd slap
a line of speakers and you just pick one from column A or one from column B. They had their basic, you basically told them what you wanted.
Yeah.
And they would figure out a way to engineer it to make it happen.
Got it.
And as a result of that, and I've seen some of their production records, they're indecipherable. When a couple of the principals came here from England when they were restarting their guitar speaker business, of which I was involved in, and so I worked together.
Did I meet those guys?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
And they brought one of these production books with them. And
from back in
from back in the day, because it was their father that was working as the general manager of the company when all that stuff was going on.
That's cool.
So he had all of this data, all these books, and there was just page after page after page that even if you had the book and you say, okay, now I've got the book, I've got all the Fane knowledge, so let's make the best one, you would basically go cross-eyed in about 15 minutes.
He's choked out by
information. I choked out.
You're like, there is no Fane model.
There is no,
like, that's the standard.
Right.
Yeah.
There is no, we start here and then we go more Spartan this way and then we go sprinkles and chucklefish or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like
this one gets the espresso beans.
Yeah, and this one gets the seared tuna eyes.
I don't want that on my team. I don't know what the hell you're thinking.
So they were all over the place, and I was talking to Paul Rivera about them, and he went and visited the Fane factory back in the late 70s. And I have pictures. I have a couple of pictures of the Fane factory, and it looked like a fucking medieval...
That he took?
Yeah.
How cool.
And it looks like a
Paul's a
medieval
titan.
torture chamber. There's this underground old factories, brick with the uh, arched hallways going from one room to another room. It was dank. They had
They
these
had an Iron Maiden over in the corner.
practically there's these chains hanging from the wall where they painted the baskets and hung them on chains. I mean, it was really medieval
It's
looking. I'm
totally a
not
dungeon.
exaggerating.
Yeah.
And
What are these chains here for? I don't know. Let's hang speaker baskets on
and
'em.
when we were doing the Fane research, we bought a lot of vintage old Fanes that were not necessarily the ones that you knew about. The ones that were in
They were the ones that were available, so you got them.
yeah, because
Let's
we
see.
wanted to see what it was really about.
Yeah.
Get into the roots
Yeah.
of it, understand more about what we were doing.
Again, guys, if anybody's popped on the stream in the last 15 minutes or whatever, keep asking questions. We'll get to them by the end of the show. We're just riffing on speakers for now, but we're not ignoring you. We'll get there.
But there were variations, subtle variations on all of those models.
Uh-huh.
And some of them were made for retail,
Uh-huh.
and some of them were made for OEM,
OEM.
specifically for a manufacturer. And some of those were very, very close, but different. There was a 40 watt, there was a 40 watt Fane that went into Sound City cabs, which this Sound City cab has this old high watt / Sound City cab.
I don't know.
There's
Can you
actually
see it?
there's actually the
Can you? No. You know what? I'm gonna take a picture of it and then I'll throw it up on
Yeah.
the screen.
well, there's two. There's the high watt cab, which is actually the transition Sound City high watt, and then below that there's a later Sound City cab that's got the speakers with the chrome dust caps on them. So there were those, and then there was a variation of those that was sold at retail called a POP 50, POP 50, and it had a blue frame and a blue plastic cover over the back with a smaller magnet, and totally different thing. Then, so when I'm doing this research, we just went out and bought all kinds of stuff off of eBay and Craigslist and oddball resources in the UK, and we found stuff from Germany, Berlin and these different cities, and just stuff popped up, and we grabbed it. And whenever we got stuff that I would look for stuff that was broken, so that we didn't mind tearing it apart.
Yeah.
And Fane was actually one of their things that they were advertising early on was that they were the first to use fiberglass as a voice coil former. And here to tell you that the material that the former is made out of is critical to the sound of a guitar speaker.
I stupidly took it vertically, but here
That's
it is.
all right. They'll get the point.
Oddball resources
Yeah.
in the UK and stuff.
But so what are we looking at
Yeah,
here?
the
So
top one is the high watt cabinet that was actually the transition
stuff.
from Sound City to high watt. That was the kind of the Pete Townsend style Sound City cab with a high watt badge on it.
That
It was actually made like a high watt cab, and then below that is an actual Sound City cab that was made to be a Sound City cab. And the difference is the way the baffle is mounted and the handles. The high watt cab didn't have handles that screwed on. They had the little holes in the side that were
right. Yeah.
that were
The recessed kind of
recessed slots that were boxed in. Like if you
Yeah.
open the back of the cab, you'd see a box around the around the holes where you would put your hands in to sort of seal it.
look what's happening.
And the seal was kind of a silly thing because
More ice cream delivery.
because it's a vented cab. So what's the point of sealing behind the handle other than cosmetics? And
Thank you.
Okay, so here we have from Whole Foods the 365 organic
Oh,
vanilla bean.
Jeff Bezos vanilla
Yeah,
ice cream.
yet another
Okay.
vanilla bean
All right.
variation.
I still remember the Gelsons. You?
Yeah,
You ready? I know what I think. Gelson's had a deeper vanilla bean. This is a bit more milky.
Yeah, it's not very vanilla beany,
It's not.
and it's also not as sweet, which is nice. But
That's true.
But it's like all 365 products. It's also less interesting overall. It's
True.
more 365 is kind of like their plain wrap.
They're Lawler Imperial.
Yeah.
Hey, no shade to Lawler. I love Lawler pickups. And those Imperials are killer. I have Lawlers in my Nash Strat and my Nash Telly. And
I had to
they're
get used-
sickeningly great.
I had to get used to that because the guy that likes clarity and detail, I was getting clarity and detail out there at the beginning until I got used to it. Now I can't get enough of it.
Hmm.
And what I realized is because of the openness and clarity of it, I'm able to make much better use of the tone control and the volume
The volume,
control on
yeah.
the guitar,
Yeah.
which is like if you listened not at the beginning of the show, but just after the beginning of the show where we turned off the stupid noise filter, so that it was
After
making
we
the
quit screwing up.
after we quit screwing up that big expansive sound, and then all of a sudden it got really clean. All I did was turn the guitar volume halfway down. So I love that.
Yeah.
That makes it that one guitar that I can use for all the things that I used 3 guitars for before. Not to mention that it's just so much fun to play.
Yeah, that guitar is insane. Bruce, if you're still on, man, you are a wizard.
Yeah, I mean, you
At
just hit
some
us-
point, do I not tell you all the time? I really want Bruce to build me a guitar someday.
Yeah, well, you should just get it done. You have to tell him
Yeah.
now because you'll see it in a year and a half. But
Or they'll just disappear, and he'll I have no more room
I can't
for peasants such as
Bruce,
you.
I can't say you hit it out of the park because you hit it out of the park every fucking time, and that's really annoying. I'm gonna
That's
let
true.
you know right now.
That's true.
So there. So Fane is all over the map. And then
The early Fanes are all over the map.
Yeah. And then they're like developing this thing where they're using a fiberglass voice coil former. Why do they give a crap about fiberglass? Because people are blowing speakers. They're putting them in guitar amps and they're blowing them up. So the reaction is going to be, well, with Celestion, their response was, we'll put a bigger magnet on it. And that'll damp the speaker and make it so that there's less excursion
Yeah.
when you snap a note. And the bigger magnet assembly will absorb more
It's like a
heat
heat sink
from the
almost.
voice
Yeah.
coil.
Yeah.
Because they already had what's called Nomex in the coil former. There was paper. The typical voice coil formers are paper, Nomex, and Nomex is high temperature it's a cloth impregnated paper. So it's basically supposed to sound like paper, but have a higher temperature rating than
Yeah.
paper.
Yeah.
And then there's a plastic, a high temperature plastic, and the name of it escapes me at the moment. It'll come to me to say. Usually it's the Nomex that I can never remember the name of, but Nomex is the one that Celestion has been using for a long, long time. And then there's this plastic composite that has a much higher temperature rating, and it will stay solidly round. It won't flex. Nomex will flex. And the plastic former material that Eminence uses for their higher powered speakers will not flex, and it will handle more temperature. But it also has a kind of a little distinctive bite on the top of it that some people find annoying. So when you design a speaker using that, you have to do things with the rest of the speaker to kind of ameliorate
Right.
that little edgy thing.
We're talking
it
about that
does.
kind of thing all the time.
all the time.
Just because it's present in a material doesn't mean you can't work with it. You just have to adjust the overall recipe
Right.
to make way for that
And that's the
particular
thing about
characteristic.
speakers, is it's all about the recipe, because it's this magnetic, electromagnetic, electromechanical assembly that's made from basically dirt. And
Oh, Boomer saying, I can't read this. Polyether.
yeah, but there's a trade name for it. Um, and
I need new eyes. Kapton?
yes, Kapton, thank you.
Thank you, Boomer.
So Kapton tends to have a sort of a brittle quality to it.
Okay.
But Kapton is what was used in all the Fender speakers.
Wait. Which Fender speakers?
Twins.
But Utah, Jensen, Oxford, the whole gamut.
Well, the CTS Pile, Eminence, that whole ilk
Oh,
are Kapton.
so that's what's in my Super Reverb 10s. It's
Probably.
Kapton.
I don't know about the Utahs. Because
No,
I
I
never
have CTS in my Super.
but CTS definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
So now this is a development, just like every other speaker company. This was a development to answer the issue of I'm killing speakers. And so Fane's answer was fiberglass. But fiberglass is kind of like Kapton in the way that it is a little harsher than Nomex, but it's not as harsh as Kapton.
Does fiberglass and Kapton chill out as they break in?
Kapton doesn't break in.
Oh, okay.
That's the lovely thing about Kapton, or the horrible thing about Kapton.
It's like
And
it's like
fiberglass
poly
is-
finishes on a guitar. That's the way it shows up
And
when you buy it.
fiberglass is
and
going
that's
to be
way
the
it'll
same
in
way.
40
But you know
years.
what's hilarious is we got some. I got basically a speaker that came in pieces, and I knew that it was going to be in pieces.
I thought you were going to say it came in peace.
Yeah,
Peace.
yeah. The guy, the seller, was just selling a speaker for parts. Well, a
Selling
1970
a speaker in part.
a 1970s speaker for parts. It's like nobody wants those parts. The only thing that's useful is the frame and the magnet, but then they were such unusual dimensions that there are no standard cones that you can buy off the shelf to replace those. And how I know that is because I asked the same question that probably everybody that's ever dealt with Fane asked them. Can you make recone kits for the 20-watt cast frame Fane that was in the 1968 high watt cabs? They're just going, don't even go there. They don't want to hear about you.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear from you. It can't be done without.
Why don't you try this F70?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're a company that understands that if there was a thriving market for that, if they knew they could sell 1,000 of them, they would tool up, or
Sure.
5,000.
Yeah.
They would tool up for that. But they
The
know
rando-
they know they're
yeah.
making, maybe 500 speakers in a production run at a time.
Yeah.
And they actually are a very high-tech company. They have another division called Precision Devices, where they make, institutional sound system speakers, 18s that if you run enough power into them, it'll pull a car out of a lake. It has that much torque and thrust.
Whoa.
These big giant speakers that
Whoa.
they're not intended to be heard. They're intended to be felt.
Yeah.
They're for Universal Studios, to shake the floor.
Yeah.
They make those kind of things.
The Simpsons ride.
So really big specialized aluminum cast frames and all this kind of stuff. So they're a really funny company. They have this one division where they're like all out in the most modern kind of development kind of stuff. And then they've got this, well, we have this little line over here that we just sort of have fun with, and we're trying to just keep the legacy alive and all that. And great. But I bought one of these speakers from a seller that it's kind of smashed up, and I'm going, great, I'll take it. So I got it, and we opened it up, and it had I wish I had a picture. I do someplace, but I wasn't prepared for it today, so I didn't I didn't dig it up, but the voice coil former looked like it was made in somebody's kitchen with a steak knife. I mean, it's cut, it's all jagged on the edges.
Yeah.
It's kind of haphazardly glued in there and hand assembled. But the if you look at a voice coil former, it's like a little cylinder,
Okay.
a perfectly round cylinder with perfectly smooth cut, top and bottom edges.
Uh-huh.
And then there's this Fane fiberglass former where the part that's coming out of the magnet, if you take the dust cover off the speaker,
Yeah.
it's this snaggletooth, jagged thing
Wow.
that looked like somebody I'm going to shave, but before I throw this razor away, I'm going to cut off the top of this.
Wow. So they call it a dust cover, but
Yeah.
it's actually
the shit cover.
yeah, travesty, horrible workmanship cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has all this goop on it. I mean, the whole point of the whole endeavor of putting a speaker together has to do with the mass of the finished assembly. A speaker
Yeah.
is supposed to convert electrical energy into acoustic energy. And it's supposed to stay out of the way of that process as much as possible. That's the neutral part of a speaker not influencing the sound. Okay? So a big thing about controlling the different resonances of the speaker are keeping the individual masses of all the parts that are glued together have to be at their absolute minimum.
Oh.
So they have to come up with really good adhesive formulations so that they can use the minimum amount of adhesive to glue everything together reliably and not add too much mass to the assembly.
Right.
And you take the dust cover off this fiberglass speaker and just got this adhesive just gooped on it. It probably the goop in there weighs as much as the coil former, So
Ew.
obviously the goal was we just don't want this thing to catch on fire. We don't care what it sounds like. We care that it doesn't blow up.
Yeah.
And the guitar
yeah.
players, they're all stoned and they're playing so loud that their hearing is shot anyway.
Yeah.
So they're not going to hear any difference. What they're going to notice is they made it all the way through like 6 months worth of gigs.
Dude, I swear that's what everybody talked about in the interview. And do the gig stuff. It wasn't, haunting mids.
No, it was Glenn Cornick of the original Jethro Tull. Why'd you switch from Marshall to Hiwatt? Because they kept blowing up.
Yeah,
That was it.
right.
Not because the fine, high frequency output transformer.
Or this
that's
one
like
goes to 11. Like that one was louder. I just needed
Yeah.
it to be louder.
Yeah, and make it through a tour.
Yeah, this one could be louder and it wouldn't blow up every night. It would blow up every fourth night. So we're winning.
Exactly. So
Wow.
the actual practical differences from one speaker to another that are in the same roughly approximate power range,
Yeah.
for the longest time, they were just different variations of vanilla. This one's got a little bit more mid, this one's got a little bit more shimmer, this one's got a little bit more thump. They're just these little subtle ingredients. And when you
But this one was on Led Zeppelin too.
exactly.
This one was on Electric Ladyland. I want that one,
This one was used in a sauce on Julia Childs. You laugh, but when people ask us for this really fine detail of insider information, I have two options. I can either say, friend, I'm afraid I'm not going to have a satisfying answer for you because it isn't going to give you the holy grail answer that you're looking for, because that isn't where it is. And okay, so why do you use Fane speakers then? Why did you use Eminent speakers then? We used Eminent speakers because at the time we discovered that Celestion was making the Vintage 30 two different ways. There was a time when they issued the Vintage 30 when when they released
You're like double cross.
the Vintage 30, and there was a transition between everybody hating it to it becoming just sort of the de
It
facto.
was the pariah.
It was a pariah, but the thing about it was they weren't trying to make the next bitchin' speaker. They were trying to make something that they could sell profitably, because in those days they didn't have.
They need to be durable too, right?
They needed to be durable, but speakers are heavy. So if American manufacturers want to use Celestion speakers, which in the UK were relatively affordably priced for manufacturers,
Okay.
if you bought them in quantity,
Yeah.
but if you bought them in quantity and you're a manufacturer in the US, now you're shipping 5 pallets or 10 pallets or 100 pallets of speakers across the ocean, and now they're hella expensive. So they have to go from the factory on a boat for 3 months, and then into a warehouse, and then all the handling charges, and then to your warehouse, and then into storage. And then if there's any defects, you know, all the process that you have to go through to return bad ones or blah blah blah.
Very efficient.
And we had Celestians where they put the voice coil on upside down, and those speakers were out of phase. And you know, there were all kinds of things going on like that. So,
but if Jimmy Page had it, it would be the one.
so the only way you could really use Celestians in the US is if you bought them in insane quantities. And we weren't buying those quantities. Next, they had changed the production format of the Vintage 30 to make it more affordable to produce, so that they could try to lower the price for US manufacturers to give better margins, so that you could afford to put them in a 412 cab. They were still more expensive, but they were trying everything. They were trying different distribution methods. They tried opening a warehouse in the East Coast in Massachusetts or someplace. They had a warehouse where you could buy from. They would ship speakers, and they would ship all of their speaker models into a East Coast warehouse.
Yeah.
And they would absorb the shipping cost of doing that in those large quantities and amortize it across the entire production, so the net cost of the unit price of the speaker was lower.
Yeah.
And they improved upon that by redesigning the Vintage 30 so it was more producible.
Yeah.
And then later they eventually went to China again to get the margin down so that more manufacturers would use it. And every time they did that, they would come to me and go, okay, now will you use them in more in quantity? But by that time, I had already told them what I wanted. And they basically said, well, you can't have that at the quantities that you're willing to buy at a time. And I said, okay. And I went to Eminence, and what's your minimum order quantity? And they said 100. And I'm like, great. How much is it going to cost me to have you design me a particular driver? They said, well, we'll work with you on that. Well, what does that mean? When you go to a car dealership, that means that they're only going to charge you 3 upcharges for the undercoating rather than 2 upcharges for the undercoating. Or the radio is going to be the regular radio and not the Bose radio, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they said, no, we have this sample process. We'll send you a speaker. You tell us what you need us to adjust, and then we'll send it back to you, and then you approve it. And I said, okay, how many strikes do I get before you cut me off?
Yeah.
And they said, until it's right. And I'm like, okay, I love the fact that you're going to work with me. I hope that this relationship doesn't go up in flames, because I'm pretty picky about what I want. But when I get what I want, I will tell the world about it. And they were like, it's okay. This is what we do. And I went, fucking far out. So the very first speaker that I did with them it took 12 samples to nail it.
Wow.
But that isn't because they were being incompetent or stupid. It was because I was learning the process.
I was wondering if you were going to say that.
I'm
You hadn't done that before
I'd
either.
never done that before, and when I did it, I started measuring stuff that I never.
Wait, can we do this? Can we push this? How do
I've got my calipers out.
Yeah.
I'm doing stuff on the bench. I'm doing this stuff in anechoic rooms. I'm doing all this crazy shit. And as I'm going along, I'm learning, and as I learn,
Well, ice cream.
I ask questions.
Thank you. May I hand you this? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
look.
you, dear. Okay, what we got now is Ben and Jerry's vanilla.
Ice
Just
cream from Vermont.
No fancy bean garbage. It's just like, let's see the ingredients. Ingredients: cream, skim milk, liquid sugar, water, egg yolks, more sugar, and then
And then it says
Vanilla.
Gelson's vanilla ice cream.
it says vanilla extract and vanilla beans. So they don't say it's got beans. They're not like going to go, oh, we got vanilla bean. They're actually using a bit of. It's very far down the list, which means it's not very much, but it does have
Oh, wild.
it does have
I'm going to refrain until you have some.
a bit of bean in it, but they don't brag about it. So that's interesting.
Oh, wait a minute. It's evolving.
Anyway, so what I was learning in that process was that when I say, okay, I want just a little more of this, and then when I get the next sample, I got a little more of that, but I lost something else.
Right.
And then
Right.
conversations back and forth, and they were helping me along the process of, when you move goalpost A, goalpost B automatically moves. You ever seen that? I didn't send this to you. Ever seen this meme on Instagram, I think, that says it's this girl is in a room and there's a desk and there's paintings on the wall and there's furniture behind her and stuff, and she moves the plate on the table like 3 inches, and then all of a sudden the furniture is on the ceiling and the mirror
A little
is
bit like the
on
butterfly
the floor.
effect.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
like boom.
Delicate Sound of Thunder stuff.
It's like trying to do artwork.
But then the
in
more
Word.
you understand the process and you can explain to the engineers, okay, hold on. We did this in the last iteration. I was looking to achieve this. I asked you to do this. This happened, but then we lost this. And they go, oh, gotcha. We're going to go about doing this a little bit differently. So we'll lose less of that. We can keep this, So you're tweaking the stew with these guys.
And
And
one of the
they
things,
were easy to work with?
yeah, they were great to work with.
That's
And one of the things that was, I got an education in doping the speakers as well.
Yeah.
So then I went, oh, you mean that matters?
Can you explain what doping is?
So doping is the flex, the adhesive that you put around the edge of the suspension of the speaker to make it more flexible.
Let me pop up.
Make it basically last longer.
What are those pictures?
Don't use the diagram. Use that picture that you just put up.
The one that I kept screwing up?
Yeah, that's that one, right?
I think it was Fane.
Yeah. So the outer there's the foam gasket on the outer diameter, and just inside that there's the shiny area with the humps. That's the suspension, and it's shiny because it's doped. That's the adhesive painted on the suspension to change its compliance. So just by putting a rubber adhesive based glue around the edge of the speaker changes the flexibility of that suspension. And when you do that, it changes the entire mid-range character of the speaker.
Oh, I didn't know it was
Yeah.
mid-range. It's
Yeah.
focused on the doping.
Yeah, it will totally change that.
I thought it was the entire damn thing. It's really focused on
It
the
really
mid-range.
changes the mid-range.
Fascinating.
That's
Wow.
why back in the day, Mark Sampson was was stripping the dope off of vintage 30s, and that was
Oh,
his big secret.
shit.
Because when the speaker's mounted
Wow.
in the cab, you can't see that.
Yeah.
And so well, this is our special thing that we had made by Celestion. They made their own labels because Celestion wouldn't approve their own they wouldn't give him a proprietary label. Well, you have to buy your own T number if you want a proprietary label.
Yeah.
So they had all these roadblocks against cooperation.
That's fascinating. And then I imagine the different styles or techniques of doping is another way of contributing to the stew.
Yeah, and so this ice cream is more like a little less doping, so the mid-range is poking out a little more, and it's got a little bit more personality, but still not as sweet as the first one.
It's, I thought it was right in the same realm sweet-wise, and I felt it was about 80% the same level of vanilla as the first one, and it was creamier than the other two.
It's not as sweet, I don't think. Or
Not as sweet, but it's approaching.
yeah, it's approaching it. Yeah.
It's midway between the Bezos ice cream.
And what we were
and the
thinking might
Gelson's ice
happen
cream.
is that describing the differences between some of these speakers is like describing the difference between five or six different manufacturers.
And look, we're geeking about
and
the
we're
vanilla.
totally geeking it out. Yeah, exactly.
And we wanted to come on and go, it doesn't matter. And actually we're going, well, it kind of does matter.
Well, it kind of does, but then
Except when you zoom out and you're like, just play the goddamn
the other
guitar.
thing is we're tasting it in these little bits, in these little glasses. Now, if we put it in a big bowl, it's going to be a different ball game.
What spoon are you eating it with, man?
Exactly.
What did you drink right before you had your taste?
All right. So, once I went through that whole process, and we actually went too far with one particular parameter.
Do you remember what it was?
It was something to do with the high end that I wanted a little bit more detail, and they did that, but I got a lot more detail.
And so,
So
it was
we
like
had to go-
hi-fi?
And I was like, I said, well, I asked you to do this, and you did that, but I feel like we just need to go to production with the one that was one step back. And they went, okay, let's try something. And so they did something, and they sent it, and then it was right.
Mm.
This was the speaker that we did this was the P100. So it was the first speaker that we did with them. And it was intended to go in a 212 combo, open back. It had to have a certain kind of suspension. Hey, Vi, how you doing? It had to have a certain, resistance to
Hey, Ziegler's here.
excursion.
Jay-Z. Hey,
Jay-Z.
John.
All right. Hey, how you doing, Jay?
Jay-Z's sighting.
So
Amanda's here now.
now
Hey, everybody.
now we're all set with that, and now we've come to the point where we know that we're not going to get anywhere with Celestion in terms of refining the vintage 30, which is too tubby for me and too sharp in the upper mids.
Yeah.
I wanted to dial both of those things back. I wanted a little more control.
And they went,
And yeah, and my attitude was the other things that I want the speaker to do, I can do in the cab. I can adjust that in the cab, and there's certain things that I could do on the cab to compensate for the one that's not quite there. But if I do that, then if you swap out the speakers and put your favorite speaker in it, it won't sound very good.
mm-hmm.
So I have to have something that will work with what people are used to or expect or want, and will also work with my version of, okay, here's what I think is an improved variation of that.
Yeah.
And the problem at the time with the Eminences was that people had an impression of Eminence as being cheap compared to Celestians.
Mm-hmm. That was my
Yeah.
understanding.
And the deal was the Celestians in the UK cost about the same as Eminences here, because there's no shipping, overseas shipping. There's no between countries duty and distribution margins and all that stuff. That was what was really making them price comparatively differently.
Mm.
And then
Isn't that
the
funny?
other thing that Celestion did to try to control costs was they ditched the cast plastic back cover. Of course, now the people are paying more, willing to pay more for speakers anyway. So now they're capitalizing on the back cover. We got the green back, we got cream back, we got the blue, we got the, the Prince purple back, all the backs.
Do they really have that?
They just have the whole back series. They're really marketing against the visual aspect of the speakers now. Why? Because it pretty much, I mean, how many different ways can they make a variation on the Celestian theme? It's got a certain personality. It's cool personality. Some of them sound better than others. But so why the transition to Fane? Well, because I started out using amps that had Fanes in them, and I didn't know Celestians from Fanes. I just thought, cool, Fanes. They're not Celestians. They're different than what everybody else is using. That was just a contrarian thing for me that I dug the way they looked. I dug the way they sounded. I dug the fact that they were something different. And then Fane disappeared and then came back and then disappeared and came back and disappeared. And then when they came back this last time, which was about 2014, I got into the process with them. And then I said, I had all my notes from previous attempts to try to get the speaker just right from these other manufacturers. I still had that records of that stuff. So I sent them that stuff and they went, yeah, whatever you want. I'm like, okay. And their engineering staff was good enough to be able to detect where we're going with this. The one particular gentleman, his name is Ford.
Oh yeah.
He, above all else, he was attentive and interested. And those are the two things when you're collaborating with somebody that you want, in a collaborator. So the funny thing is, the F70G, we did the F70 and that became their retail speaker. And then we did the G, which is our variation, and we've discussed what that variation is, and that there's certain things about it that are kind of hard to articulate because you won't be able to. It won't make any difference to you in terms of what to expect. You basically just have to listen to it and go, I like that or I don't. And different people will hear. When we sent the speaker to the other John Brown, he got an F70 from Fane, and then we sent him an F70G. And because of physics, it's very possible, and I was concerned about this, it was very possible that in the context of his test, it very well could have turned out that he didn't hear any difference. But I expected him to hear some difference. I just wasn't sure how much he would pick up on it. As it turns out, he way reacted differently than I expected him to. He heard it way different than I heard the difference between the two.
Interesting?
So then I have to go, okay, well, that goes back to the cab that he's using it in and the amp that he's driving it with. And here's another thing. And we've talked about this before too, but since we're talking about speakers again, we're going to talk about this again. If you're testing speakers in a 412 cab, they all have to be the same speaker because they're all wired together. Speakers turn electrical energy into acoustic energy. So that means that the electrical energy that's energizing the driver is different for one driver than it is for two or four or three or whatever, because you're wiring them in parallel.
Those 312 cabs.
Yeah. Well, there are some. There are 310s, and I made a cab that had 2 10s and a 12 in it. So there's all kinds of dynamics in there where you can sort of kind of trick the speakers into cooperating with each other and coming up with interesting things.
Yeah.
You can also make come up with speaker combinations that are just fucking abominable, you know, but
Yeah.
by the same process.
Then also, what are you playing through it, right? A
Exactly.
guy like Ronnie Earl,
Yeah.
who's diming his super reverb, is utilizing his speakers different than
Totally
somebody
different
who's,
animal, right?
you know, running a rack, you know, high gain.
Right, and a super reverb, all the speakers are wired in parallel, so they're 8 ohm speakers, and they're all wired down to 2 ohms. Now the amplifier is behaving a completely different way than it would if it was an 8 ohm or 16 ohm amp, and on and on and on. Okay, so a 412 cabinet, you've got the speakers wired in series parallel. That means this pair or this pair, depending on the manufacturer of the cab, ours are vertical pairs. I think Marshall's are horizontal pairs.
Oh, I don't know.
So that doesn't matter so much to the sound. It's just how they arrange the speakers to make them most easily wired internally. You know, it's just sort of a convenience thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Works better for us to do it this way, works better for us to do it this way. But at any rate, one pair is wired in series or in parallel, and the other pair is wired in parallel, and then those two pairs are wired in series with each other. So both sets of speakers are getting electrical energy from a common source, but in both pairs' cases, the source energy is being manipulated by the behavior of the two pairs of speakers. So there's an interaction, an energy input interaction, as well as an acoustic output interaction. And that's why 412 cabinets have this really unique behavior that a 212 doesn't have, and a 112 doesn't have, and a 610 doesn't have, or a 612 or 812s or whatever. The series parallel wired 16 ohm cabinet has a really unique signature no matter who makes the cab and no matter what speakers you put in it. It always has this interesting little characteristic.
And you can hear it?
Yeah, you can definitely hear it.
Interesting. Wow.
And in fact, well, you can hear it, but you also have to take into consideration that you're hearing how the amplifier behaves under those two different conditions. And you can prove that out. With the deliverance cab and the fat bottom cabs, it has a stereo mono switch.
Right.
So when you plug into the mono input and you set the switch to mono, it's a 16 ohm cab. If you switch it to stereo, but still only use the mono input, it'll put everything in 4 ohms. So then you would actually have to, in order to hear that and experience that difference, you would have to have somebody playing, somebody listening, and somebody in the back. When they switch the cab between stereo and mono, they would have to switch the impedance on the amp at the same time. And we did that. We had a crew of 4 people to be able to, and you have to do it fast. Like bing, bing, bing.
Yeah.
Okay, switch it. No, switch it now.
And you can't be looking at it while it's happening.
It has to be instantaneous.
Yeah.
Now we can do it with the ZMAX. We can just set the ZMAX up and set it one way and then set it the other way. And you can hear it immediately. When you hear it immediately, you go, okay, this is what we've said all along, but it was really difficult to prove.
Oh, I remember we were talking about that playing through the ZMAX. Wow. Okay, so
anyway, going back to the F70Gs, what we basically did was what we asked Celestine to do originally, which is smooth out the claw and get rid of that floofy bottom end. And there was another sort of a delicate high frequency quality to about the Fanes that it wasn't really too present, but it was there, this nice little sparkle that it's not so sparkly that it sounds harsh on overdrive, but it sounds wonderful in mid gain and clean sounds. So it's just a rounder, more sophisticated version of a vintage 30, I guess I would say. And that's what I had wanted all along, and I finally got it, and that's why we use Fanes, because I've got a relationship with them. They understand the quirks of our requests. They're able to articulate what it is we're asking them to do, and then they deliver it, and they do it consistently. So plus the fact that it all ties back to my original sort of inspiration that drove these designs in the first place. I just want to hear when I plug a Strat in, I want to be in heaven. When I plug a Les Paul in, I want to be in heaven. When I plug the Esquire in, I want to be in heaven. They can be three different doors. I can get there a different way, but as long as it ends up as this fulfilling, satisfying experience, that's all I care about. So they're very subtle. They are as subtle as the subtleties that occur between 6 flavors of vanilla ice cream. They're just these subtle little things.
Yeah.
And they express themselves differently because you're playing different guitars, different amplifiers, different reactive loads that emulate the reactive behavior of speakers, which is ostensibly to fool the amp into behaving as if it was plugged into a speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And on and on and on. And all this is convenient stuff, but not sacrificing tone and inspiration and feel for convenience. Like an extreme example is a modeler sacrifices a lot of stuff in terms of feel and inspiration for convenience. It's 100 times more convenience to use a modeler if that's how intense your workflow is. But it's also 1/100th as satisfying to me to play as it is to an amplifier. So that's really the trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to inhale some oxygen for a while you
Well,
tie loose ends together.
we're running up on the 2-hour mark, so I think it's time to start doing
No, we're
speed running
not. Are you
questions.
fucking kidding me? No fucking way.
Yeah, man. Full of hot air.
Well, stop asking me such detailed questions. Jesus.
I don't even think that we got through half of what I thought we could talk about tonight, but it's
I was
question
all
time.
ready to go on to the next phase, and now I'm just
I think it's gonna have to be a part 2, man.
I'm just ready for my next coffee martini.
You ready to answer some
Rest-
questions?
Yeah. Only I'm gonna make you answer them because you already know the answers. You've heard it enough times.
Who wants to hear me? Questions. All right. Here we go. What do you think of the AR-75? Because Steven has one in his Memphis combo.
See.
He also uses it with the GPD IIR.
Okay, here's what we have. We have
Thank you.
Haagen-Dazs vanilla bean. Let's look at the ingredients on this. Oh, look, cream, skim milk, cane sugar, egg, ground vanilla beans, and vanilla extract. So the
Yeah,
same
but-
ingredients as the previous one.
But did they describe their doping
Yeah,
process?
no, they didn't.
Ooh, devil's in the details.
Thank you.
This feels creamier than them all, but it may just be a temperature thing. Well,
Oh, distinctly different texture. Wow, that's really close to the second one.
you think? I think it's a lot more vanilla than the Bezos special.
Was the Bezos the special, the second one? I thought that was the third one.
No, the Bezos ice cream was the second one, the pretty generic
Hmm.
365 brand.
Okay.
I
See?
think this is close to the Gelson's in terms of vanilla.
I think I like this the best so far. Isn't
It's-
that weird?
It's this and the Gelson's.
They're almost indistinguishable between each other, but this is the one that I would send to Fane and say, more like this.
Yeah.
Hey. Okay.
All right.
Okay. AR-75. First of all, we started out with the P75. So we had the P100, which is the first speaker that we designed for the Pitbull Classic 212 combo. We needed a speaker that would handle the power of a 100-watt combo with 4 EL34s in it. A
Yeah.
pretty heavy duty
Yeah.
100-watt, like serious 100-watt. Not
Yeah.
like the amps of the day that claimed to be 100, but they were more like 80, 70. And there were a lot of those. This was like
You want to
the
name names?
the for real 100 watt. Oh, I mean, Mesa's famous for overstating their power output ratings by 30%, and the the 90s era Marshalls, the DSL series, and those things, those are all kind of creeping down. The 5150, they were creeping down in power output, and they were calling them 120 watt amps, but they were actually delivering 75 watt amps. And you were going, oh, I really like this. It's kind of squishy and spongy and saturated sounding. It was saturated because it didn't have hardly any power output relative to a real 100 watt amp. So that's what manufacturers learned about guitar players, is they want it to sound a certain way, but they also want it to be easier to play.
Yeah, so it's getting squishier like a 50 watt.
Yeah,
rather than
yeah. So
unforgiving like 100.
So the P100 came out because of the Pitbull Classic 212 combo. And then when the Pitbull 45 came out, we put one of those speakers in the Pitbull 45 combo. Because the Pitbull 45 was preceded by the 5012, which also had a little bit, a fair amount of power. And a 100 watt speaker in an open back cabinet, it would be possible to blow a speaker like that in a 50 watt amp. So it was good to have that, but it turned out to be a really rugged speaker, and it was a little bit too powerful for that amp. So we put the P75 came from the P100E, which got a smaller magnet, so it didn't have quite the horsepower, but it had a rounder, more organic sound for the Pitbull 45. When the Memphis came out, we wanted to do two things. It's a 30 watt amp, so the 75 watt speaker was a little overkill for that, and we wanted it to be a little bit bouncier and a little bit more touch sensitive.
It's very much that.
And we also wanted it to be lighter weight, so we put even a smaller magnet on that and named it the AR75. So it was pretty much like the P75, but with a smaller magnet and then a little bit of adjustment on the cone, the doping. And by this time I started really learning enough about doping that I built my own turntable for doping speakers. So instead of having them, this was kind of like a convenience and an efficiency related thing for the manufacturers as well, because I felt really bad about going, yeah, this sounds like really close, but I don't know how much of what I think we're close and not close about it is the doping. And I hate to have you keep sending us speaker after speaker after speaker with this amount of dope and that, and that's the only change, because that's crazy. And I felt like I was imposing on them by doing that, especially with the 412 cabs. Every time we got a speaker sample, it had to be 4 of them.
Yeah.
To test in the cab.
Right.
Couldn't test one.
Yeah.
And because that wasn't its intended purpose. But in the case of the AR75, I said, send it to me undoped, and then I'll check it out, and then I'll progressively dope it a little more, and then put it back in. So we had 2 speakers. One was the reference, and one was we doped it a little bit, A/B them, and then a little bit more, and then A/B them. So I had this little brush and this turntable, and I would just carefully add the doping at about a 1/16 of an inch at a time. Wait for it to dry, put it back in the cabinet, A/B it with the reference speaker again. And that's how we got to the doping level that worked well for the Memphis, and that's why it became the new version of that speaker.
Okay. I remember when you had me going around town with a Memphis and a Neo in it. Like, try this out. Tell me what you think. I was taking it to all these gigs.
And the Neo was interesting, but ultimately it turned out to not be the right speaker for that amp.
Right. Okay.
But it makes total sense that you would use it with the GPD-IR, because that speaker has good sensitivity, and there's not very much output power in the GPD-IR. So it makes sense, especially in that Memphis cabinet. It's kind of a bigger cabinet, which the whole point of that cabinet was to add low end resonance. So when you plug the GPDI into, I guess, either just the speaker by itself or into the effects loop of the Memphis and into that speaker, that should work really great because those
What's
they're kind of at the same purpose level there.
what's in the R112?
That's the AR-75.
The AR-75. Okay, so that's probably what Steven has. He
Yeah.
probably has the Memphis and the R112. Okay, next question.
And it's that speaker for the same reason, which is the recording cab is intended to be used with really low power amps or at very low volume
Right.
and record nicely.
Yeah,
So the AR-75 is perfect for that.
yeah.
When have to get this? Oh yeah, you asked this last show, and I'm actually glad and not glad you asked that question because we are always working on module stuff with Synergy. So they asked me politely not to divulge anything about what's
Did they ask
going
you
on with
politely, or
them.
did they?
I'm sorry?
Did they ask you politely, or did they smack your hand?
No, it's polite. It's polite. When can we hope to get? I will say that I hope that you'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe this year, maybe not. It's about all I can really say right at the
That's a
moment.
good answer.
I just think it's a great idea, and the execution is going to be crucial. It isn't going to be any of those kinds of things. It wouldn't just be a preamp of the amp and then have us say, "Oh yeah, that's the amp."
Yeah.
Luckily, the Ultra Lead and the Deliverance modules are more about the preamp side anyway, and the power
Yeah.
amps
Oh
section.
my gosh.
Tiny.
Hmm?
I mean tiny.
The-
Not full.
Oh, so this is
Thank
this is
you.
a tiny espresso martini, whatever that means.
And no syrup this time.
No syrup.
I
Oh,
think
that'll
it
be
was
interesting.
Too sweet. You guys eating vanilla ice cream, so it should be.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. He might have more of a sweet tooth because this is definitely not sweet like the first one. Do you like it?
I love it.
Yeah.
Nom, 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 nom.
Thank you, Erico.
That's lovely. Okay. So making what I don't want to do is the things that I'm seeing them doing lately, which I find kind of like, really? A module has an attenuator in it. It doesn't really have an attenuator in it, but you're calling it an attenuator, and it's like that irritates me because I don't think that I would wish that they would just think through the representation of what they're trying to get across to people before they apply names just to get people's attention. There's a lot of products out there like that I see that just to me are like clickbait bullet points kind of things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we don't play that. So if we can pull off something that will actually do what people, Dan, when you ask that question, you're asking for a specific thing. You hear it in your head. You can imagine how it would feel to play. That's what I think about when I'm doing a design. It's guys like you that are going, they're not, I just want a thing that says Highwan on it or sounds. No, that's not what you're asking for. You're asking for a fair representation of the playing experience. And I am not interested in doing anything less than that because I think it's not fair. It's
Oh, this is that
It's
pricey
just-
one I never get
it's
because
just
it's too pricey.
it's just not our jam.
Thank you.
And I don't mean to sound like I'm thumbing my nose at another manufacturer. I just think that there is a better way to represent that stuff. And
McConnell's.
McConnell's, it's called RR Lockhead Vanilla Bean, and I don't know what RR Lockhead means. Let's see.
We're about to find out.
Vanilla beans sourced from the Madagascar farms of a 50-plus year McConnell's partner. Vanilla revolutionary guru RR Lockhead. Okay, so they've gone to Madagascar and found an expert in
You
voice
start
coil
tying that, yeah.
voice coil formers.
All right, guys. Let's see if it's any different than the Haagen Dazs.
I need a little bit more of my palate cleanser. Here.
I think that's a palate influencer.
All right. Okay, here we
All
go.
right.
Cheers. I think if you're going to make that much noise about the
Do you
vanilla
taste the
bean,
Madagascar?
that's what I was going to say. I think if you're going to make noise, that much noise about being from Madagascar, that you would get the other shit out of the way so you could really experience that. This to me is pretty close to the last one.
Yeah, it's good, but man, I wanted it to be vanilla bean in your motherfucking face,
Yeah,
and it's just not.
I was
It's
sort
good.
of, I was
It's
sort of
good.
waiting for that too. These are all good.
Mm-hmm. So far, Bezos loses for sure.
You know what though? The aftertaste of this one is more distinctive in the vanilla bean department than the previous one. See, and now you have to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You taste it and then you have to wait for it to open up a little bit in your mouth.
It's good.
Just like when you
good.
play, you plug in speakers in a cab and then you start recording and going, this is what the speaker sounds like. Well, no, you know what you need to do is you need to like pound the shit out of it for 3 or 4 hours and then walk away for a week. Get your ears realigned, get completely disconnected from the experience, and then go back
Have a few of these.
and try it again and be amazed at how your impression changes from your first impression. That's what I always do. I used to, whenever we would get a new part, like a sample part, an electronic component, or a capacitor, or a speaker, or a transformer, as soon as we get it, the shipping manager would come over and he had this big smile on his face. Hey,
Yeah.
Steve,
It's
the
Christmas.
part came. And I'm like going, okay, put it on the side of the desk. And he was kind of like, thought I was going to go, yeah. I just went, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
And I'd leave it for 3 or 4 days until I could put my full attention on it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then I would open it up and check it out visually and stuff, and then start working out a test jig where I could really explore if it was working properly or not and all that. It had to be in the headspace. I had to be in the zone to be able to do that task. And I used to not have the patience to do that. I was like, okay, I'm just going to drop everything and I'm going to go do this.
I'm actually trying to get back to more of that. I've become, in the last decade, way too precious. Like, I can't handle that unless I have 5 hours time to really go deep. And then it's like, okay, I was supposed to do that 3 months ago, you know? So I think it's finding a balance. Are you done answering this
Yes.
module question?
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
afraid that's all I can divulge right now.
Okay.
And Mark, there's like all this salted caramel shit coming out right now, and everybody's doing salted caramel. So it's really difficult. There are caramel ice creams, caramel flavored ice creams out there. Some of them had chunks of caramel in it. Some have salt and caramel, and I love salted caramel. But I'm waiting for somebody to just like really nail it, and I'm not finding that yet.
Okay. So, Buddy Chris says, I have a distribution question. Are there any plans to have Sweetwater stock some Fryette gear in the future? I may or may not have moved to Fort Wayne and started working there. Oh, Chris, do you know Robert Williams yet? He's an old friend of mine who is a Sweetwater stalwart. Fantastic guitar player and human. Don't know if you know him. But
we've been in talks with them on and off for about the past year. It's kind of between it's kind of a logical step for us. On the other hand, we're so busy meeting our existing dealers' expectations that as much as we would like to have a working relationship with them, we want to make sure that we hold up our end. So, but that's a conversation. And if you find yourself in a position uh, where you could, be part of the conversation, and then that would be something worth discussing. And so you're welcome to reach out to us depending on what your future plans are, and we can discuss that. We're open. It's a great organization, and we have been approaching that conversation sort of tentatively for a long time, simply because it's really difficult to go to a dealer and say, yeah, we really want to work with you guys. Okay, here's the order. Well, that's going to take 6 months, just because it's been so busy and we've been so consistently working our asses off to jam out the orders for our existing dealer base. So there's room to have that discussion. Sure.
Chris, Robert is in sales, and I was gonna say hit me up and I'll connect you guys, but I'm really not on social media anymore. Maybe I need to turn on my stupid account again. Yeah, if you just ask around, he's been there forever. But yeah, Robert Williams.
You can email Terry@fryette.com.
What is this?
Ew.
Wow.
What we got here?
One more last.
Oh, there's one more ice cream left. So we have
So does this go before or after?
I don't know, it's up to you guys.
we
I
have
think I'll go after. Wow.
yeah, me too.
How fun.
This is like,
Treats.
what's the common denominator? Sugar and caffeine.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that is the Sweetwater answer. Okay, David asks, have you heard or had any experience with Rawson Sparfield speakers? Supposed exact replicas of Fane 12A 100 watt and 60 watt purple label? That sounds...
Yeah, I've heard of Rawson. I've heard of that they purport to make an exact replica of the Fane 100 watt and the 60 watt purple label. And my experience with Fane speakers, not just our current experience, but my past experience, is that when you're saying that you've duplicated the exact Fane model from any early to mid 70s model Fane speaker, that could be 50 different speakers. That's the way they operated. Their tolerances were all over the place. What they called a particular thing was all over the place. When a manufacturer would say, do this instead of that, they wouldn't even ask twice. They just did it. So they would have had to do a lot of research to come up with something at best in the general ballpark. And then the purple label was applied to a lot of different models. So
Oh, really?
you can't say that the purple 60 watt speaker or this particular 100 watt speaker, you can't say that just because the label is purple, it's specifically that speaker with these characteristics. That just wasn't the Fane's nature. They were very fast and loose with the iterations. And as their production book,
What do you want? What kind of speaker you want?
it's
want one of these?
a testament to, there would be like 4 different model variations of one speaker, and sometimes the number was different just because the label was a different color or a different size, or it was the same as another company's speaker. They made a copy of that same speaker, but they put a different model number on it because it was a different company, and they didn't want to. Well, we can't give you that speaker. That's specially produced for, Sims watts. So we can't give you that speaker, but we can give you that speaker. Only we changed the model number by 2 digits.
Yeah.
Then we can make that for you. You have to specify it that way. All these kind of like shell game kind of stuff's going on. That was really in evidence in early to mid 70s Fane. And that's why it's really kind of hard to nail down. So if I had, and there's definitely going to have to be another part of this, and here's why. What we haven't discussed yet is why guitar speakers got so powerful, and the sensitivity went way up and the power handling went way up in the late 70s into the mid 80s. And we're going to get into that because that has so much to do with why big ass high performance guitar speakers kind of rose like this and then disappeared like this. Manufacturers were chasing the market, and when the market
Are
didn't
you about to do this now?
no.
Okay.
Manufacturers were chasing the market, and when the market didn't react to what they were doing the way they expected it to, it's because they were way behind the curve. And so we'll get into all that.
Okay, that's
But
awesome.
that
Good to
also
know.
that also has that also spills over into the transition for Fane from medium powered speakers to more rugged medium power speakers to more bulletproof higher powered speakers, and shortly after that, pretty much the demise of Fane. They did the same thing that Sound City and a lot of other manufacturers do, which is engineer themselves out of existence by not accurately understanding who they're making their stuff for.
Mm.
So yeah, it gets really murky and convoluted.
Seems kind of the opposite of what they're doing now,
Yeah,
right? Which is nice.
yeah, they're really taking the variations on a tried and true model.
Yeah. And we're not gonna be Celestion. We're gonna be Fane.
But it's still going to be variations on vanilla for Fane's version.
Sure. Yeah. But not like, okay, now we're gonna chase Celestion and try and beat them at their own game.
Right.
Okay, this is the last one? Oh, okay.
All right.
Wait, is this ice cream or is it gelato?
This is gelato.
Okay. Thank you. You want me to help?
All right. The last one is another Madagascar vanilla bean from Talenti, which is a gelato.
Oh, thank you.
And that's going to be the last blast.
No, it's a different recipe.
Now, I had crescendos in one of my cabinets a long time ago, and boy, I couldn't get them out of that cab fast enough. The crescendo got its reputation from having been in Gilmore's cab for a while, but it's not all that clear to me that whether or not it was a.
This is devoid of vanilla.
It's not all that clear to me that there was that speaker was really pivotal to Gilmore's sound. I think it was just something that. Okay. Nice and clean, reliable. We're not breaking them. Great. By that time,
Take a bow.
by that time in their career, they're all about the circus. Right?
Yeah.
I think the live rig was secondary.
I've been giving you the same amount every time.
Uh-huh.
But feel all
I'll
brand
hold
new.
I'll hold it and you can lift them up.
Oh. Interesting.
See, now when I was a kid and I worked in a
So light.
It's
I worked in a couple of
Air.
ice cream shops in Seattle.
were you scooping?
I was scooping, but there was this one particular place.
Stevie Scoop.
It was an independent ice cream place. They were the first independent place in Seattle that was competing with the 31 flavors.
Yeah.
And these guys, they were a gay couple, these two guys. They were fantastic employers. They were passionate about ice cream, and they knew everything about it. And
You're like, yes, nerds.
they were nerds about ice cream. And one thing that they really discussed with us when they were teaching us how to scoop and how to explain the different kinds of ice cream to the customers, that they were talking about the air content and how
Oh.
the ice cream had to be kept at a certain temperature so that it didn't get too warm and start losing its air the way it was aerated,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And
It's elevation.
yeah, and like there's one of those containers, which one was it, that was like almost half the weight of the other ones?
That's the first one that we had, and the one that I think we kind of uniformly, if not the best, is in the top 3.
Yeah.
That was interesting. That last one was, it's not like I wouldn't eat it, but I'm not even sure it's vanilla.
There's nothing outstanding about it.
No.
It's just kind of like,
No.
sorry, you already got beat out by all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So that was kind of anticlimactic, but okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm moving on to this strawberry. What is this? Strawberry chocolate.
Okay,
Square.
do we want to strawberry top? I'm not even going to try the strawberry chocolate
Well, you're
because
missing
because
out.
it says
good.
strawberry on it.
You not a strawberry fan?
Not in chocolate.
Hmm.
It's like white chocolate that somebody cut their finger in.
It's really nice. All right, we got to speed this up.
Yeah.
All right, so next question. Have you guys seen the Jim Lil videos about tone woods, amps, and speakers? And what's your take on it? I have not. Yay, nay?
I haven't seen it, but I can tell you this. The speaker's performance is dependent on the enclosure that it's housed in. And whether you call it wood or tone wood or just the housing, how you house a speaker is going to affect its performance. And that means not only what it's made of, but how it's built, how the joints are configured, if there's any bracing inside, the thickness of the baffle and the material of the baffle. Is the material of the baffle different than the material of the sides in the back? Is it open back? Is it closed back? Is it convertible? If it's convertible, generally I find that convertible cabs don't sound as good as either one of them. Why? Because an open back cab has less bracing generally than a convertible cab. A convertible cab has to have more bracing in it so that it will support
Right.
a partial back cover that you have to remove.
Yeah.
So that's why we never did a convertible or removable halfback or anything, because it just didn't sound as good as an open back or a closed back. So my attitude was always, well, why are we going to make something half as good as the two products that we already make, and just tell the customer, look, pick one. Every time you want the manufacturer to slice and dice what you think you're going to get less than you expected. And are you honestly going to tell me that you're going to go to a gig on Thursday night and have the cover on, and then you're going to go in the recording studio a couple of days later and take it off? I just think that that's ludicrous. And the reason I say it's ludicrous is because I've been there. I've tried it. I've done it. I've heard it. I went, okay, this is totally not worth my time.
I picture Steve standing there going, that was dumb.
Yeah.
That was really
I mean, what I got
dumb."
for going to a nightclub and playing at a gig, and after reading about Allman Brothers taking the backs off their 412 cabs, what I learned from that what I learned from that exercise is how much it costs to recone G75, G25s and not have them sound as good as they did before they were blown. So, sorry.
Okay.
That's my take.
Okay. Buddy Mark asks you to compare and contrast bigger amp into a Celestion Peacekeeper versus a smaller amp into an R112.
We anticipated that question, and that was something that we were going to talk about, but we're all talked out. So that will be
Part 2.
because I do have shock, amazement. I do have some comments to make about that, and we'll get into that. It's interesting. It's an interesting discussion, not just the Peacemaker, but as anybody who's paying attention knows, Eminence did it 10 years ago, and it was Celestion didn't improve upon the concept. They just made a Celestion, a less flexible Celestion version of it, and we'll get into that. That's an entirely more detailed discussion. I'm happy to
Yeah, we just need more time to do it.
explore
Kind
that.
of flesh it out. Yeah, but that's awesome. Well, Flo asked this, but I think we really kind of covered it. With the physics material they use to make speakers, how flexible is their range of control to fine tune stuff? It's pretty wide and infinite within the realm of vanilla ice cream, right? It's still going to be a guitar speaker. It's going to be a guitar speaker. It's going to be a guitar speaker.
Yeah, it's really funny. A couple of months ago, we were having ice cream for dessert. So I had two different. She's got one kind that she wants, and I have another kind that I want. So I got the two ice creams out of the freezer, and I opened them up, and then I got a scoop, and I ran the scoop under just
Warm
tap
water.
water. One warm water, just tap
Oh.
water temperature. If you run the scoop under hot water, it'll be too hot, and it'll mush up the ice cream.
That's what I always wanted.
If you run it under really cold water, it won't get it at least to room temperature where it will slide into the ice cream.
Yeah.
So you want it at that middle temperature where it's not gooking everything together and melting the ice cream, right? So I run the scoop under the tap, and she'd never seen me do that because she wasn't in the kitchen when I was doing that. And she goes, "Oh, that's gross." And I'm going, "This is how you do it."
You're like,
And she goes, "Well, no, I don't think anybody does that." And I said, "Listen, my 19-year-old self knows more about this than you do, so just zip it, Edith." And you know what she does now when she serves ice cream? She runs the scoop under tap water. Because it does make a difference. And like these things with the physics and the material, and as we've been talking the entire show, all those things have really high tolerances. When we're talking about a capacitor or a resistor, we're talking about a tolerance in component specifications that are in the range of 1%, 2%, 5%. So like a 1 meg ohm resistor. Even a 5% 1 meg ohm resistor these days are usually going to measure at 0.998. Okay. So even the manufacturing tolerances are not keeping up with the ability of manufacturing to do really accurate production. Okay, so compare that to a speaker where a 10% difference in the size of the voice coil gap will make the difference between a speaker that sings and a speaker that you need to throw in the garbage can.
That's wild.
Not to mention whether or not it's perfectly aligned in the voice coil, and oh, the humidity of the geographical region that you're in when you're playing it.
Oh,
And that goes for the
that makes
speaker,
solid sense.
and it goes for
we all
the
know this,
wood
right?
in the cab. Well,
Yeah. And the
you think that
guitar and
you
the-
think that everybody knows it, but everybody doesn't know that if you're in Japan or Florida or someplace where there's a lot of humidity and hot weather, and you're playing through a vintage Marshall 412 cab or a 59 Les Paul, and then you come to LA, and about 2 months later you go to gig, and all of a sudden your rig sounds 100% different and usually about twice as good. That's because the moisture content is different. And speakers are made of paper. They absorb moisture, and in dry weather they expunge moisture, and they sound entirely differently. So the control variables on speaker production is so outside of normal production tolerances for electronics. It's insane. So there's only a certain level where you can control that. And we used to say when you bought 120 Celestion speakers, you got 120 different speakers, but that wasn't the case with Eminence. Well, why wasn't it the case with Eminence? Because in Eminence, Kentucky, which is the Midwest, and if you're in Kentucky or Indiana or anywhere in that area, during the high humidity, high heat season,
which our buddy Chris now is, because he just moved to Indiana.
yeah, it's brutal. But then on top of that, Celestion has typically always had a wider voice coil gap than Fanes and Celestions.
Mm.
So they're not efficiency, but the sensitivity tends to be lower on similar models of speakers of Eminence than Fanes or Celestions because of the gap. That's also why Eminence can make 10,000 speakers a day, because they have a more open tolerance to get everything lined up properly. Weber speakers were famous for their really super tight voice coil gap, to the point that they would even disclaim shipping damage if you got a speaker and the voice coil rubbed. They would say, well, it wasn't rubbing when we shipped it, so you're going to have to file a shipping damage claim on that.
Like,
because
we know
because we know
Yeah.
what the tolerance was when we shipped it, and it was not rubbing. And it even says on the documentation, or it used to, I don't know if they still do, but it used to say, because they sent me some samples, and on the documentation they explain that their voice coil gap tolerance is so tight that if it's rubbing, contact your shipper and file a damage claim, because it didn't leave the factory that way.
That's pretty awesome.
And that's what happens in speaker manufacturing when they're trying to get a lot of a particular product out. The manufacturing tolerances have to be able to support that, and you only want to give up enough of the tolerance that it doesn't impact the performance of your product in
Right.
order for you to ship quantities. And once you trespass that threshold, then you become the kind of manufacturer where, those tight tolerances don't really matter to us.
Mhm.
And that's when the guitar players go, yeah, but it matters to me. And therein lies the rub. There are people that swear that Eminence sound better than Celestion, or Eminence are just as good, or Eminence are not as good, and that's entirely related to the experience and the geographical region that you're in and the type of music that you're playing. It's not
Yeah.
about the quality, because Eminence has pretty much about the top level of consistency and quality in their production as anybody that's making speakers these days.
Wow.
They just have a little bit wider production tolerances to accommodate that, and that's also why they're so reliable and so bulletproof.
Mm.
So yeah, you give up a little to get other little characteristics.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever matched Celestion redbacks with high watts?
No,
Okay.
redbacks are pretty. We don't take every speaker that comes out and go, oh, we got to check this out.
And yeah.
We spent a lot of time formulating our formula. Sorry. And refining it to the point where it matches the vision for the product. And we've never sold cabinets with any speaker that you can that you want to order, because that means that we would have to inventory every single thing that comes out in order to sell one pair or one speaker or one quartet of those speakers 3 times a year. It's just not
Right.
it's not something that we're interested in, and it's also not something that's consistent with the sonic output that we're trying to achieve. So there isn't a lot of motivation there to do that. There are people that want to buy our cabinets empty,
Hmm.
and we politely decline, not because we give a shit if they put other speakers in it or not, but the QC process is really specific, and it's a pretty high bar that they have to go through in order to pass. So in order for us to sell an open back speaker cab, I mean, not an open back, I'm sorry. The martini's getting to me. In order for us to sell an empty cab of any particular model means that we have to load speakers into the cab and put them through the QC process. Test for vibration, test for air leaks, test for whatever, little buzzes and noise.
Yeah.
We have to go through that whole process, and you can only do that when you're driving the cab with a driver, which is the speaker.
Yeah.
So that
So you're
means
also kind of QCing the speaker at the same time.
Exactly.
That's in the cab.
it just so happens that you have to do those processes together.
Yeah.
So in order for us to sell an empty cabinet, that means that we have to load the speakers into it to test it, and then take the speakers out to sell it to you empty. And that's more work than assembling the cabinet and boxing it and shipping it to you. So naturally, we're not going to do that. And you say, well, hey, you can save the money on the speakers, but we spent the extra money on the time to go through that process. So it isn't beneficial to you, and it isn't beneficial to us. What we recommend is that you buy the speaker as it's produced, and then you put your own speakers in it and try it out and see if that was worth all the effort. Of course, the problem there is, and we understand this, the problem is that wherever you bought the speaker from, if you install it, it's yours. So naturally you want to say, okay, we've tried it with these speakers, and it sounds like X, okay? Then when you get the cab, take the stock speakers out and put your X speakers in that we said sounds pretty good, and you decide for your purposes it sounds like ass, then we're going to hear, oh, you said it sounds great, but it doesn't sound great. It sounds like ass. And that's very subjective, and we would agree with you that that's a difference of opinion. So how do we navigate that? We just don't go there, because it's kind of like a losing proposition for both sides, right?
Yeah.
That's our feeling about it, and that's been our experience about it. So nothing negative about any other manufacturer's speaker. It's just our experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Chris, you had made a comment that you were really curious about Fryette cabinets and choosing the speakers to go in the cabinets. I think that's something that we've actually covered it previously, but we should do it again when we do part 2 of this. Just talking about your cabinet construction and the journey of doing that and choosing which speakers go in there and that sort of thing. So, but I think that's the history of, so that would be pretty long. And then Brendan asked this question, can the same be said about 2 amps of the same series, hypothetically made by the same dude? I think that was in reference to the conversation about, probably, the figuring on the violin and the guitar is different, and each speaker is going to be different. And yeah, so when you're QCing deliverances, do you hear slight differences?
Well, not enough to make you go, oh, this is distinctly different. If it was some variation of hand wired point to point, whatever, you would hear differences. And those differences are mostly wrapped up in the wiring process. Although, you know, historically Marshalls are well known to like sound different on any given model. 10 amplifiers will sound slightly different because their production tolerances were not all that to begin with. They were more interested in volume and sales.
Yeah.
And you can see that as their production goes along. It's actually progress. I mean, manufacturers make progress. They figure out what's most important. They figure out what yields the best product for the price that they're selling for and the customer satisfaction that ensues from that. And they're saying, okay, this is our lane. Another manufacturer go, well, our lane is we're going to be the Maserati. We're going to be the F1. And then there's another company who's like, well, we just want to knock the price in half, and we're just going to put any garbage in there to make that happen. And for one person, $399 they're going to be in heaven. For another person, $2,500, they're going to be in heaven, and nothing else is going to work for them. And then the next person, $5, $6, $7 is going to be what gets them home, because they feel like they have something invested in the specialization and the quality and the attention to detail that they demand, and that's going to be worth the price of admission for them. So every manufacturer has to find the definition of where they want to be, which lane they want to occupy. And ours has always been the most consistent and consistently reproducible. And that's why we do primarily PCB. And when we do ethers, oh my God, are we OCD over those things? They go back and forth between QC and final production 3 or 4 times over stupid things because they're detectable. I mean, one wire inside the chassis, you move it 1/4 of an inch and there'll be a little background noise that'll go away. And you move that wire and then you lock it down in that position. It's a very finicky amp, and it'll change its character in subtle ways, but in more distinct ways than our other amps, based on which combination of tubes you might put in it. I mean, we have a guy that said, "Yeah, I changed V2 in my ether, and it totally changes the sound." Well, V is the tremolo oscillator. It's an oscillator. It's not in the signal path. It doesn't affect the signal, the gain, the frequency response, anything. It's just an oscillator that makes the tremolo go up and down. But the guy swears up and down that when he uses this different tube than this one, the amp is like heavenly versus crap. And it's the tremolo oscillator. That's like saying the tire pump that came with your car determines whether or not your car handles like a dream or feels like you're driving on rocks.
Did you look at the design of the lids of all those ice creams? The lids were key.
It actually is. And you know what? We had one brand last week that when I picked it up by the cover, the bottom dropped off every time. All these others, you could pick them up by the top and put them back in the refrigerator and fine, because they sort of had this little snap when you put them on.
Yeah.
But this one particular brand, the cover fit really loose, and so when you pick it up with the cover, the container would drop on the floor, and I did that 3 times. God damn it.
Do you like floor ice cream?
I love floor ice cream. I must, because I kept dropping it on the floor.
All right. Is the R112 still the recommended thing for the GPDI IR, or is that getting a rethink?
We actually haven't made any of those in a while. And we've been talking about doing a run of them. And I think we still have some of the speakers in stock too. It's a cool little cabinet, and it was designed to work with the GPDI. And given the current iteration of the GPDI IR, it should work just as good, if not maybe even a little better, because now the GPDI-IR has a little bit more horsepower to push the speaker. So it's,
I use mine every day.
do you have a R112?
I sure do.
Can I borrow
I use mine every day.
it?
Yeah, you can borrow it. I'll run
I
it
was,
through my-
I knew that was going to be the answer. That's why I asked.
Actually, you did borrow it for a while. Do you remember? You had
No.
it here for a while.
No, I don't remember.
And I actually remember what you said. I'll tell you when we're done. Well, okay. You said, that's a really cool cabinet. I know what I would do if I did another one.
Okay. Well,
You had opinions.
but when was that? 3 years ago?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was.
Okay, well now the GPDI-IR is out, and so that's going to change my opinion again.
Because that wasn't, that was actually before you had the prototype ready for it too.
Mm.
So I don't even know what you were using it for here.
Yeah, well, there was another part to that R112 that never made it to production, but it might make it now. So that's probably what I was talking about.
Can you divulge?
No, because it's still experimental.
Oh, okay. Jeez, I don't think I know what that is.
Um,
Now I'm intrigued.
yeah, that's
Okay.
the idea.
All right.
Keep Joe intrigued.
I think you did this, but maybe we can do it in a really succinct manner.
We better, because we're way over
I know
now.
we're way over. Can Steve describe the sound he wanted when he worked Fane on the F70s? Please vocalize the sound. So we'll all know from now on. So it was like a vintage 30, but chilling out that upper mid and tightening up the flubby bass, essentially, right?
That's it. Yeah. The vintage 30 was always and I actually we described this about an hour ago,
Mm-hmm.
but there was another aspect of that I wanted to mention, and we got off the subject. But what I said previously was that what you just said. I wanted to get rid of that annoying upper mid-range bite
Yeah.
that I found too aggressive. Now, it works great for some things, and we had Warren DeMartini over at the shop about a week ago, and we were playing different amps and screwing around with stuff, and I had an amp set up the way I thought. It was a Deliverance 2 Plus. I had it set up the way I thought it would be a good sort of baseline place for him to start to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes and he plugs his guitar into it, and I'm like going, that sounds big and huge. And he walks right over and turns down the mid, turns down the treble, and turns down the bass. And it sounded like he threw a moving blanket over the top of the thing, and he goes, yeah, that's nice. And I'm like, I'm going, mouth, stay shut. Just stay shut. He's happy. You don't have to push him out of his comfort zone. And, people are like that. I kind of I want to hear these sparkly things.
I have to have all of that.
But some people are really like, no, I don't need all that in my face.
Yeah.
He's got very sensitive ears. It's not that his
Mm.
ears are wrong or he is wrong. He's more sensitive to the higher frequencies that he finds irritating. So he dials those back, and then he's happy.
Mm-hmm.
If he's happy, I'm happy. If any of you are happy, I'm happy. If you're not happy, then we can have that discussion on the Fryette forum, fryette.forum.com. Please go there. Oh, and by the way, like and subscribe here too. We never say that, but you should do it.
You should do it.
You should do it.
Please.
But in terms of how we're going to design an amp and present it to people, everybody has their way of setting the knobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of mid-rangey. It's a little bit bright. Okay, turn down the mids and the brightness. Yeah, but I never set my controls that way. I like them right here. But turn them down here and then you'll like it. Yeah, but I don't really like setting it down there. We have that conversation so many times. So there is always the player's impression and what they're used to hearing, and that you tend to I do this. I either find and begin working with artists that who share similar sonic goals with me, or they don't. And if they don't, then I try to figure out, will the amp get dialed in the way they like it? Can I show them how to do that? And will they accept that? Or will they go, no, I have to have the treble control at 9?
Lou has it nailed.
And so there's always that aspect of it. But what I wanted to say about the speaker thing, that I was going to talk about, and I think I've lost that train of thought now, but it had to do with God, it was right on the tip of my tongue. We had discussed
The tweak to the Vintage 30 formula.
we had discussed what it is about the F70G
Mm-hmm.
and how similar and how different it is from the Vintage 30. And what I can tell you about that experience is that there were days when we took 4 Vintage 30s and put them in a Sound City 412, a new Sound City 412 cab, and you were there, sat it side by side with the F70G cab, and couldn't tell which one was which. And it was just a mood thing at the time, and I was really surprised by that. And I think, why did we do that? Oh, we did that because Stephen Carpenter has an artist deal with Celestion, and he gets
Oh, that's
he gets
right. I
like
remember hearing about
he
that.
gets like 8 or 12 Vintage 30s a year as part of his artist program.
Uh-huh.
So whenever his new shipment comes around, it's when he's calling us. I'm like, you know what's that new cab you're making? I need 2 of those, because he wants to put Vintage 30s in. So what he does is he brings his Vintage 30s over, and now I'm shooting myself in the foot by telling you that we put Vintage 30s in a cab for artists, but the artist provides the speakers so that we can put them in the cab and test them. So that's the caveat. So I guess I'm saying is, if you want one of our cabs with your chosen speakers in it, you have to ship us the speakers. They better test good, because if they're not, if they're defective, it's not our fault. So that adds an extra layer of complication. But the point is that in the room on a particular day with a particular amp, you would A/B them, and then you would under certain circumstances you would struggle to identify what the significant differences were. Where in another room with a different amp, it would be like stark, the difference.
And then also,
but that
North
was
Hollywood
the whole
factory-
point of the Fanes. Was originally Fanes were so specific to high watt and Sound City that they sounded like shit with Marshall amps. And my goal with the new Fane speakers is that they would still sound great in Sound City and high watt amps, but they would also sound good with Marshall. So we had to find a formula that allowed the speaker to drift over into the other amplifier's territory, and that just made it more versatile and more useful.
That's what I hear them as.
To the point where, under certain circumstances, if you have one cab loaded with Vintage 30s and one cab loaded with F70Gs, and they're side by side, acoustically they'll tend to blend together, and you'll have a difficult time hearing. Unless you really separate them, you'll have a difficult time hearing the difference.
But the North Hollywood factory was a lot, like, you have a way more subtle listening environment.
Way now. Yeah. That place tended to sort of blur things together.
Yeah. And now it's ultra detailed.
Yeah.
It's a treated room, and it's great.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Can I buy a P50E recone kit?
Here's the thing about that. Eminence will provide a recone kit. So by the time you buy the recone kit and then take it to a recone place and have it reconed, you'll have spent what it would cost to get a replacement speaker. I mean, that's pretty much the deal.
That's too bad.
And then it depends on who does the recone. So there's always this thing about, I'm sorry, but Eminence has an ace production line. Regardless of what I said about their production tolerances, those guys are on top of it quality wise. And I would not guarantee that a field speaker replacement guy, unless he's a bigger pissed off curmudgeon than I am, you're not going to get the level of assembly quality and assurance that it's dead nuts on as you're going to get from a factory speaker. So by the time you order and buy a recone kit and then give it to a guy and have him go, well, this isn't the adhesive that I use this. And like, well, this is the adhesive that Eminence sent along with the kit. And they do send the adhesive that they use. And the kit, I don't believe the kit is doped. I don't remember if the speaker was doped, because the doping is part of the process after this cone is installed. The dope is the next step. So they can't dope the cone. I don't think they dope the cone and then send you a kit where the cone is pre-doped. I don't know how they would do that, because it's in a mechanical process, right?
Mm-hmm.
That means that somebody would have to sit there and dope it by hand on an unmounted speaker. I don't think that flies. So you have to that's the minefield that you go through trying to get a recone done these days. And back in the day, when labor costs weren't so extreme and that was more the norm way to do things. Even then, though, like in the 70s and 80s, when I blew speakers and took them in to get them reconed, I got all kinds of radical results, from passable to just garbage. I honestly sent some Fanes to a place in Chicago that Fane recommended to have the speakers reconed. So I dutifully sent them off to this shop in Chicago, and I got them back a few weeks later, and they had used black RTV to glue the cones in. RTV, silicone in the tube, which takes probably 2 days to really cure and is not something that you would use to glue a speaker with. The speakers came, they put the speakers kits into the speakers, glued them with RTV, put them in the box, and shipped them back to me. So when I opened the box and pulled the speaker out, the cones were glued to the cardboard box that the speaker came in. That's how incompetent they were. And this was Fane's authorized recone outlet. And I was just like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. I called Fane and I went, are you for real? And they went, oh, what happened? And I told them, they goes, oh dear. And then like a week later, I got 4 new speakers in the mail from Fane. But this was a long time ago. This was before Fane was sold and closed down and then reopened.
Oh, really?
But oh my God, I mean, I've had nightmares. And even in those days, one of the best recone places in Southern California, which was Orange County Speaker, those guys were ace. They knew what the hell they were doing. But if you gave them a Celestion 25 to recone, they would use a third-party cone supplier's kit. Go, well, this is the one that they recommend, but it didn't sound anything like a greenback. It was the right size. It was basically the right dimensions of the cone, but the ribs were different, and whatever the voice coil material they put on was different. It was like, all right, I put the speakers in the cab and sold the cab. And right after that, I found a good deal on a high watt cab with the original Fanes in it, which at the time were the production Fanes. So I was okay. But the more I think about that, sorry, CT, just get a new replacement speaker.
The Absurdist says you must be going for a new live record time.
I'm trying to wrap it up, but man, I mean, you're asking really good questions. They deserve the time that they deserve, that they require.
What are your thoughts on the Iron Man 2 100 watt?
have
Pros and cons of that design.
Any attenuator that's a passive attenuator has it's got its place. Some of them sound really good. Some of them sound okay. I have a hot plate. I think it sounds fine. Does it sound great? Is it as good as the power station? No. But did I get a lot of use out of it? And did I put a lot of miles on it? Absolutely, sure. And so I never diss the competing attenuators out there. I only say, and this is our expert opinion, is that putting a passive attenuator between the amplifier and the speaker is apportioning off a percentage of the power that would normally go to the speaker, and in the process interrupts the reactive behavior between the speaker and the amplifier.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter if it's the Iron Man or anything else, that dynamic is in play. And for a lot of people, it's not significant enough and they're happy with it. I don't have to plug it in. I don't have to worry about replacing tubes. And yeah, I don't get the effects loop, but I don't really use that. And okay. So there are always going to be pros and cons. But after having experienced what I experienced as a revelation in hooking up the power station for the first time, now it's just so automatic to me. I don't even think about it anymore. It's just like, I like this. This works for me. It's a dream come true, and I don't have to give it any more thought. We did evaluate the power station design when we first came out with it, which was about 2015 or 16, and we put it up against the hot plate and the rock crusher and I don't know, 2 or 3 different units that were all quite nice. Sure. But none of them did the thing that the power station did, and that was why we released it, because this was just another little thing. The real key thing to me was the whole effects loop thing. To me, that was just like, even if I was fine with that the way it was, oh, the effects loop. Oh, you kid, I can't live without you. Now that I've experienced that, I can't undo that. So that's my thought. It's like, sure, whatever works for you and you're happy with it, then I'm not going to say anything other than I'm glad you're happy with your rig, and then so go play more. Go enjoy playing your instrument and playing your music and knock yourself out. Great. I am firm. I'm a firm believer and continued user of the power station concept, because it just sort of ended the whole conflict that I had with attenuators. When that thing came together the first time, I went, oh, all right, I just felt the chains come off, and that was how I feel about it, and that's my thoughts.
All right. Is the 2150 still coming in the future?
Very near future, as a matter of fact.
What is it that makes the 2150, 2100 apodictically the GOAT, the greatest of all time? Huge and punchy. Big trainees, plate voltage, filtering. What's
Well-
the recipe
Well,
that makes it so luscious?
Well, the biggest thing in the 2150, the 2 key things are the size of the output transformers, and that it had and will have a toroid power transformer. So it's going to be a snappier experience. The best way I can describe it is the 292 is so incredibly close in behavior and performance to the 2150. It's kind of silly. On the other hand, those big, expensive, heavy transformers do give it what I call the sort of difference between a spinet piano and a grand.
Mm.
That extra sonic breadth, the sound
lot.
stage, the
Mhm.
Page Hamilton describes it as that just the feeling under his feet when he plays a power chord. He says he feels it in his bones. That he loves the 292. It works. It's lighter. It's available. Works in my fly rigs, and I can use it, and I like to record with it and stuff. Uh, he kind of regrets the modern day, uh, you know, complications of touring, not being able to bring 2150s anymore because it's so heavy and bulky. Same with Dean.
Yeah.
Same with Dean DeLeo. You know, he stuck with his classic power amps as long as he could humanly do that until it just became so apparent to him and the band how much they were spending shipping gear all over the world because of the weight and size of those things that he finally just went, okay, I need this money to go in my pocket. And I don't blame the guy a bit. So, but for the guys who just want that experience and want the most latest and best expression of it, yeah, I mean, I can't wait for that thing to happen because I've been thinking about it for a long time.
Chris is asking, so the Fanes fit right in the Deliverance cab, even though it was designed around the P50.
Yeah, that was a big thing.
So I was pretty happy. Okay, this is kind of a funny request. Bass is talking about buying a GPDI, and they say, "Can you show me which one I'm gonna get? Can you hold it up for the camera, please? Do you one better." Here, let me pull your question down. There's the front and the back. Live, not Memorex.
And that's the actual unit that I was playing through at the beginning of the show and after the beginning of the show when it actually started to sound good. And so those are the settings. That's the actual one that I was playing through. And the top one is just sitting on top of that one to show you what the rear panel looks like.
All right.
Ew.
Oh, Peter. Hey, dude. How integral is the Celestion Alnico Blue to the Vox chime sound?
Big deal. It's probably half of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Fane has made an Alnico called the A60, and that is a beautiful speaker. And you would put that side by side with the blue, and sort of accomplish the same thing we accomplished with the F70, which is the blue is bitching. The A60 is just as much so, although probably the blue, well, you know, the blue has got a little bit more sparkly balanced top end, like the traditional Fane sound. So the A60 Fane is right up there. They're expensive. They don't sell a lot of them because of the cost, but they're pretty dynamite speakers. But yeah, a well broken in Celestian Blue and an AC30 or yeah, they're pretty tied together in the DNA.
We playing the blue and the ether?
Yeah, we did. We set up two of them and we
Sounded
A/B'd them.
mighty fine.
And actually, they were kind of like, we looked at each other and go, are these close enough to even discuss? And I think the consensus was that either one of them would fill the bill.
Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were the two best versions of
Yeah.
Vanilla Bean. You might have addressed this before. Thoughts on the Celestian?
Hey,
Red Back?
Torrin, what is with you? I keep seeing your Facebook page and you're like on the plane every 2 days going somewhere. You can like pack me in your suitcase any old day because I could use a getaway. What you got?
Thoughts on the Celestian Redback?
Same answer. We covered that. Wasn't it the same question from the other gentleman about the redback?
I thought so. That's what I was saying. I thought you'd covered that, but
Yeah,
I couldn't up
yeah.
anything that was a question.
I don't,
You know, this
especially
is,
just what's going on right now. And I don't mean it to sound dismissive of anybody, any other manufacturer's stuff. It's just we're settled on where our speaker range is right now, and we're so wrapped up in the new product development that we're trying to get completed that people are banging on our doors about every day that a lot of stuff is going to have to get completed before we find the headspace to go listen to other stuff. And normally I like to go out and listen to the new things that are out there, but I'm not expecting to hear developments that make me go about speakers. Not at this time. I'm not seeing or hearing anything in the way of buzz on speaker releases that would make me snap my neck and, oh, we got to get some of those and check it out. You know, I mean, it's just that it's a flavor, and there are variations on the flavor and variations on the color, and great. I have about the same attitude about that as I have about colored vinyl. This is, yeah, there's some stuff that works for, and it's not going to be anything that we're going to be really groveling over for at least the rest of this year.
so I threw this up here. I know it's facetious, but tell my jazz, fusion, country, death metal band, you know, should they buy Fanes? And I actually think yes, because of its brand of vanilla and evenness and ability to really be adapted to anything that you're playing. I mean, that's all I use now.
You know, Page Hamilton had a really funny reaction when he first heard the F70s in a fat bottom 412 cab.
Uh-huh.
And that was when we had first made the transition from the P50s to the Fanes.
Yeah.
And he had been rehearsing, and they were getting ready to go through, do a slew of dates. And he said, yeah, I need to bring my Ultra Lead over and get some tubes replaced on it and some stuff checked out. We're rehearsing down the street. Can I bring it over? Yeah. So he comes over, and we had just loaded F70s into the fat bottom cab. And so we had a fat bottom with P50s in the room as well. So we plugged it in, and he played through the cabinet, and he plays a few chords. Yeah. And then we switched to the new cab, and he was just like, wait a minute, what just happened? It's just like, it's way too distorted now. It's way, and he felt like the rug had been pulled out from under him. And he said, man, that's really different. And reached up, and I turned the gain knob on the lead channel down 1 or 2 notches. I just turned the gain down a little bit.
Yeah.
I said, try it now. And he goes, what the hell did you do? That's perfect. And it just was that the Fane was so articulate that it didn't need the extra gain from the preamp stage to hear the subtle harmonics in
Totally
the overdrive,
that.
right?
Yeah,
It just
yeah.
brought them out more to the point where he was
a lot of extra information.
Yeah,
Right.
he was actually taken aback by all this extra
'Cause
information.
he's been playing that cab for a long time by that point, right?
He took it
With
back.
the Eminence.
He took it back to the rehearsal place with him.
But I mean, he'd been playing it the previous version for a long time. So
Yeah,
he knew that
and
really, really
what I'm
well.
saying is he took the amp, he took the cabinet with him back to rehearsal because he was going right back to rehearsal with a lot of intrepidation.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and then an hour later, he called to tell me that all the guys in the band were dog humping over his new sound. And kind of that's all he really needed was like the rest of the guys in the band just jaws dropped. And when you listen to those cabs side by side, the experience isn't that radically different. It's just a little icing, right?
Yeah,
It's
but
a
I
little
can see,
enhancement, a
you
little
know,
more fullness.
But there's that thing, if you are eating the same thing every single day and somebody changes one little piece,
It's like the
you
new
really
restaurant in
notice it.
town. Oh, it's so amazing! Until after you go back to that restaurant the third or fourth time, you go, "Why was I so excited about the differences?" But that's what happens. That was really funny, his reaction.
Is there a particular reason why all of the Fryette cabinets use 16 ohm speakers?
Because I like the way they behave. And that's it. I just like the way the 16s behave. The
Cool.
8 ohm, the 8 ohm speakers. We actually have 8 ohm F70Gs. And why did we get 8 ohm versions? I think we got them because because somebody wanted their 412 cab to be 8 ohms, and then use it with a 212 cab that was also 8 ohms. So we put 16 ohm Fanes in the fat bottom 212 cab and 8 ohm Fanes in the 412 cab series wired, so both cabs were 8, so he could set the amp to 4 because that's the way he liked the amp to behave. So we bought some thinking that we might offer them both ways, but that just became complicated because people would, what should I get, and that whole thing of sometimes offering too many options just makes people's lives complicated.
Yeah. All right, we got one more. Any chance you would have Cliff Chase from Fractal Audio on the show? I think that would be awesome.
It would be.
Do you know Cliff?
No,
Don't either. That would be really, really great.
we should probably do that.
Yeah, that would be really fun.
Take the gloves off.
I think would be really constructive.
Yeah, probably
Yeah,
would.
yeah. Everybody, thanks for sticking around. Dang,
Jesus.
3 hours and 16 minutes, Fryette.
Hey, you're the one that kept throwing questions at me. Jeez. I'm trying to shut up more, man. You're just bad influence.
You were not trying to shut up. Every answer was like, and I got several personal anecdotes.
Oh, jeez.
But that's what the people want.
Hey, well, we kept it down below 4 hours.
Hey, it was fun. Well, actually, that's funny because I think season 2, we used to go
Four and a half all the time.
Yeah. And we were also drinking on the show a lot more at the time.
Yeah. And the world was ending in a different way. So.
Yeah. And next year it'll be a different way. Anyway,
Thank you,
love all
everybody.
you guys.
Thanks for hanging out.
We'll do part 2. Will we do that next time?
Part 2 of part 51 of part 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 42, level 42.
Take care, everybody.
All right, everybody. We out.